Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner. This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to not another episode of Submission Radio, but episode 99. Dennis Gradov here with Kasper Ozalowski on the cusp of a milestone episode next week for Submission Radio 100. But before we get to that big episode, wow, Cass, what a weekend in MMA it's been, more particularly UFC 203. So much to talk about, and we're going to do it all on this episode today.
There is a gigantic amount to talk about. I mean, UFC 203 just wrapped up. Where do you even start? There's CM Punk's debut. There's Stipe Miocic successfully defending his title in a crazy fight against Alistair Overeem. There is the Werdum Travis Browne fight / travesty / what the hell happened. Edmund Tarverding got involved in that whole fiasco. There's a lot to discuss, and we've brought a man to discuss it with us, and that is Elias Cepeda. We've had on the show many times. We're going to be doing a big in-depth breakdown with him, but first, we're going to be having some sexy guests. Now, there were supposed to be 4 guests, not including Elias this week. Some big juicy guests, couple last-minute pullouts left us a little bit light, but we do have the star power nonetheless. We have Demetrious Johnson, the UFC Flyweight champion. He's going to be on the show. Can't wait to chat to him about Ultimate Fighter 24 and a whole bunch of things, and just in general where his career is going, things like that. And of course, TJ Dillashaw, the man that was victorious at UFC 200 and believes that he is the next rightful man to rematch Dominick Cruz for the UFC Bantamweight title. A lot to speak to him about, so it's going to be a juicy, sexy show.
That's right. So much to talk about, so much to get into, and we will. But before we do, just a reminder, if you want to follow us on social media, jump on Twitter and follow us at SubmissionAUS, or jump on Facebook and like our Facebook page. We love talking to you guys. We love receiving your messages. And we've set up Twitter in a way where we don't have to follow you back for you to message us. So you can pretty much jump on there now, shoot us a message. We love talking to the listeners and hearing what they have to say. Also, love hearing your thoughts on who should be on the show, what should be coming up, or topics that you guys like to hear us talk about. We love hearing your feedback. But, Kasper, you mentioned we have a couple of superstars on the show. The first one is on the line, and I believe you're about to introduce him.
Alright guys, our next guest is arguably the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. He is the UFC Undisputed Flyweight Champion. He's currently waiting to see who he fights next as the winner of the Ultimate Fighter 24 is announced. He is, of course, Demetrious Johnson. Demetrious, welcome back to the program, man. How's things?
Things are good, man. Thanks for having me back on. I always love coming on here and talking to you guys, and everything is good. And
oh, it's good. It's good. It's good to hang out with you. Welcome to our new hang session. Let's talk about Tough 24 for a second. Have you seen the new season of The Ultimate Fighter yet?
Of course, I've seen a new season. I was on it.
What do you think, man? What's the thoughts
it's
so
awesome.
far?
It's awesome. I've always thought about it's a tournament of champions. With Joseph Benavidez and Henry Cejudo being the coaches. I mean, it's just awesome that the UFC is finally getting a chance to showcase the 125-pound talent that's around the world. So, you got a champion from Japan, Brazil, Legacy, Titan, you got them all. And I'm excited that they're doing it.
Well, last time we spoke to you, you barely had time to digest the idea behind the Ultimate Fighter 24. A few months later and a bunch of changes later, it looks like you're a bit of a fan of the concept now.
Yeah, absolutely, because I thought they were just going to go around and just grab, do open tryouts. And then, I thought that wasn't right. I thought that, they're going to do open tryouts. And I think a lot of guys should be able to get out of their contracts to try it, because that's what everybody in the UFC is trying to do is get a title shot. You look at Joseph Benavidez. He's racked up 5 consecutive wins against top-tier guys. And, you look at, Ryan Benoit. He said he wanted to, get out of his contract and jump in the tournament too. And I thought that would have been fair, but then they're like, no, we're going to get champions from all around the world to see who's truly the number one champion. That's what we're going to do. So the guys who are in the house, they are champions. They're professional athletes instead of the guys who are in a regional circuit or fighting at the casino, or 3-1 or whatever. It's actually Matt Chanel Danger. He has a name from, the MTV show. If people ever saw that episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting you say that. The UFC obviously scrapped those tryouts and obviously went with the plan that you just mentioned. Was there any point where you sort of voiced your concerns to the UFC about any of this, and did that have anything to do with the format changes?
No, I gave him my honest opinion about what I think might sound better, or actually I gave my first opinion about the first thing, and then they kind of went back and changed a little bit of it, and I think it worked out for the better.
So essentially it's because of you this format changed, correct?
No, I don't want to say this is with me. I would just say that, I gave my opinion, and somebody might be like, oh, that actually sounds a little bit better. Let's just go with that. I'm not the executive producer or the producer of the show. I'm just, the end game for the show, you can say.
Well, you'd think they'd throw you some executive producer credits. I mean, you are the champ and possibly pound for pound the best fighter in the world, but we have to get your thoughts. What do you think about the talent so far and the fighters and champions the UFC have pulled together? Do you rate them?
Yeah, they're, do I like them or do I rate them?
Well, I mean, from a fighter's perspective, do you think they're high caliber fighters?
Yeah, absolutely. They're champions, especially, I've always had a high respect for the Shooto Japan. That's where Kyoji Horiguchi comes from. He's an amazing fighter. You also look at they got Shooto Brazil. That's Andre Pederneiras, this kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan of all these guys. The biggest thing is that they're champions. The one thing they might run into is that, you saw the episode last night where Zulu fought, the Japanese champion. So you basically had Africa versus Japan, essentially good old Street Fighter style, With that being said, you see Zulu, his stand-up is way better than the Japanese champion, but, in Africa, they're not known for their wrestling. So you can see there are deficiencies in some of these guys' game. We've only seen a couple of fights, so we'll see how more of the show, turns into.
And I mean, deficiencies are definitely not something that you want to have when you step into the cage with yourself. Do you think that any of these guys are at the top sort of 10 level compared to the UFC caliber of flyweights?
That's a hard thing to say, my friend. The UFC top flyweight is no joke. I mean, there's been a couple guys in there who fought in the UFC already. Guys like Tim Elliott, Demetrious Page. They've been at the UFC level and they didn't do so well. So the top 10 level is no joke. We're fucking killers and we're beasts out there. We're monsters in the octagon. So, we'll see what happens.
Do you have a pick? Is there someone that stands out to you on the show that you think might make it all the way and maybe even end up facing you?
Yeah, when the show got announced, and they grabbed, some of the old UFC veterans, I went with those guys. I went with Tim Elliott and Demetrious Page. Those guys have been in the big show. They fought the best around the world. Demetrious Page, he's fought in WEC, and he's also, champion. Tim Elliott, he's already fought, in the UFC before. So I went with those guys. They have more experience. These other guys, they have experience too, but they never had experience under the big lights and the big shows, and that's a huge difference.
Do you feel like this is pretty much the exact thing that the UFC flyweight division needed? Because obviously you're sort of at this point where you're facing a lot of the same guys and people are sort of looking at your future opponents thinking, man, there's a lot of rematches in store, and all of a sudden you've got this massive influx of new names and faces. Do you think this is kind of what the division needed?
Absolutely, and I hope the UFC keeps all the guys on the roster. They're all amazing fighters, and we need a bigger roster. And now, essentially, when I look at the show, they're basically trying to build stars out of the show. And the only way you do that is get them on TV, you let their personalities get seen, and then keep, half of them, the guys who perform very good. And then you also have two other coaches who are getting a lot of spotlight TV time, Henry Cejudo, Joseph Benavidez. And then with that saying, I'm getting spotlight TV time, not like, reality TV time, but I'm also getting, they keep bringing up, this guy's going to be good to fight Demetrious Johnson. Oh, this guy could probably beat Demetrious Johnson, blah, 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 so forth and so forth. So it's good. And then at the end of the show, you might come out with 5 stars to where now, you can market some of it.
Yeah, and a lot of people are talking about that. This is one of the better tough seasons that's been around for a while. So I feel like it brings a lot of credibility back to Tough as well. But you'll face the winner of Tough in December. When we spoke to you last time, you said that you wanted to fight around September and that December was too late for you because you wanted to stay active. How do you feel now that you'll end up fighting in December anyway?
I feel good, man. Like I said, I suffered a little injury during. Hey, 1 second. Hey, you say sorry right now. Get your ass back here. Oh, punish that one. So like I said,
the Tough show.
Yeah, right. So when I got injured June 25th, that's when I had to pull out the Wilson Reis fight. And with that being said, I was trying to fight 3 times this year, and my body just wouldn't let me do it, So it's good that I'm giving my body a chance to actually relax. I actually got to enjoy summer vacation for the first time in maybe 3 years. Wow. So I'm very excited. I don't regret it at all. I actually got to enjoy a little bit of life with my children, took my son to preschool for the first time, his first day of preschool. So I'm enjoying life, man.
That must have been like a completely new world for you. Did you almost forget what it was like to sort of enjoy a holiday? And was there some sort of much needed time that you needed to spend with your family?
Yeah, just to do some, I don't want to say soul searching in my life, but just hang out with my family. You spend your whole life working to build wealth and build a family and all that stuff, and sometimes people get to stop and smell the roses. And for me, I've been building up my Twitch channel. I've been very excited for TwitchCon this month. I'm excited for my kids to go to school, so I'm just excited to work hard for it.
Is there anything, I'm wondering, a lot of times when people sort of take this time off, obviously in your case it was sort of incidental, did you discover anything about yourself? Was there any moment where you sort of like walking by a beach and you were like, bam, big epiphany right here?
No, not at all. I think the biggest thing is after my injury, when I first started fighting, one of my coaches, he said, friend, he said the first thing is that you always there's two things that fighter needs to do is make weight and fight. Only two jobs. And the second one was, the third one was make sure you always have enough money to cover your bills for at least, 3 or 4 months, regardless if I can't make any money. And so that was a big eye opener. I mean, I've always saved my money. I'm not a big flashy guy. And, when I got injured, injured my LCL, who knows? I didn't know when I was ever going to come back. I didn't know if it was a torn ACL or what. So if I was not blowing my money and didn't have a lot of money coming in, then, I'm basically stuck. So, I just realized I'm a smart man. I'm setting myself up for a great future to, if I keep fighting like this and save my money like this for another 6 years, then I'll be set up where I don't have to go get a day job if everything goes according to plan.
Well, just speaking of that Wilson Reis fight, UFC 201, you mentioned the injury that forced you out of the fight. But what were your honest feelings about fighting the number 6 ranked guy as your title defense?
It doesn't matter to me, my bills, my paycheck's exactly the same. I think you see a lot of guys who are starting to come out and say, no, I'm not going to fight that guy, even though he's a number 1 contender, because I want a better paycheck. And you're starting to see a lot of champions do it. And I understand why they're doing it, because the UFC's made it a point. Champions don't get paid the top dollars. And, the people, you got a guy who can come out who's never lost. I have nothing against GSP, but I like to keep it real. You got a guy who hasn't been active in 3 years, and he's way more money than any champion on the roster, probably besides Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. But that's what the UFC has started to do, and you're starting to see a lot of people say, if I don't get this title shot, this is not a sport at all. And I think we're starting to lose that mystic to where we have, 2 of the best fighters in the world going and fighting each other to become a champion. But now everybody's like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight the number 1 contender. I want to fight the guy who everybody likes to watch fight, so I get that big paycheck. Trust me, I'm about to jump in that boat too, but I will never turn on a fight, and I'll just fight anybody.
So just sort of explain that, because it sounds not so much that you're down on super fights, but it sounds like it's not really a priority for you. I guess one of the big questions is, where do you sort of stand on this Dominick Cruz fight? Because if your paycheck is always going to be the same, does that mean you're not so much going to be campaigning for it? No.
I mean, it's not the right time. I think, let me throw this in your guys' pond real quick. Let's say I was going to, I beat the Ultimate Fighter winner, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go fight Dominick Cruz. And then you guys, okay, sweet, he's finally going to do a super fight. But let's say I beat the Ultimate Fighter. I defend it again. That's 9. I do it again, there's 10. I'm on the verge of breaking Anderson Silva record. I break Anderson Silva record. I have 11 consecutive title defenses. I've broken the record. And maybe then everybody's like, you're the best pound fighter in the world. And then I'm like, okay, Dominick Cruz has defended his belt multiple times. He's built his name up. He's been active. And then I'm like, boom. All right, now it's time for the ultimate. Now it's time for the super fight. I think if I go that path, it's going to be way better and sell way better, do way better numbers than if I was like, okay, I'm going to go fight you now, Dom. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So you believe sort of down the line when the timing's right, it's going to be much better. But do you ever worry that if you wait around till the timing's right, the fight may never actually come together? Because obviously Dom's got some tough challenges coming up. The division's always difficult in flyweight. Are you worried that if you wait too long, the timing may be off because one of you guys might lose, or the opportunity might not be there anymore?
No, I'm not worried about it. I mean, if it happens, then it happens. That's how I live my life. If I lose this fight against a tough fighter, oh well, shit happens. You're gonna lose, and I think people who are like, oh, I got to do it now and make it happen so I get the big dollar. Yeah, that's the route they take. But for me, like, one of the things that stuck by me that Eddie Alvarez said in his interview with Errol Wani, he says, I'm fucking rich. He goes, I'm absolutely rich. And the air horn, he goes, well, what do you mean by that? He goes, I got a beautiful family. I got a beautiful house. I got a wife that loves me. He goes, I'm rich. And I was like, you know what? That's right. Being rich isn't always about money. So for me, I'm already successful. I've already exceeded my expectations of how far I was supposed to make it in this sport. I was the guy who's working 9 to 5, watching Joseph Benavidez and Dominick Cruz battle it out in the WEC, in the WEC cage. So now for me to be like, oh man, I got to make sure to make this happen and this and that, then I'm getting away from the values of what got me into the sport in the beginning, which is just learning a craft, mixed martial arts, and fighting the best fighters in the world. And if the time is right, and if we lead up to that point and it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, then it wasn't meant to be. Bye, Pete.
Yeah, I'm curious because there's been a big shift in former champions complaining about their pay. Luke Rockhold at the moment is holding out to fight because the contract just isn't right. TJ Dillashaw went from getting 70 to show up and 70 to win to 25 to 25 right after losing the title. A lot of previous champions taking a major pay cut. I know you mentioned that money doesn't really matter, but do you ever worry about the fact that if you do lose the title, you may end up in the same position as those guys, getting a lot less than what you're getting now?
I think that's with any. I think that was in anybody. I think the only person who's ever going to lose in a fight is still making $1 million is Conor McGregor. That's just because how his contract structured or whatever. But you got a guy like Luke Rockhold where he was a champion and he lost, and now his pay is not what it used to be when he was a champion, and he's a little upset about it. I totally understand that. It totally makes sense. Same thing with TJ Dillashaw. I was mind-boggled when I saw that Sage Northcutt made more than the champion at 135-pound division. So, that's just to show you, it is, don't get me wrong, it is about the money. It is absolutely 110% about the money, because if there was not money on the line for these fights, I wouldn't be fucking fighting. I'll be in the gym still training and having a good time, but I wouldn't be pushing my body to 185 beats per minute, make sure my body's 110% healthy, make sure I'm getting my diet on, and, make sure I cut out alcohol, drinking, and all that stuff. So there's a lot that goes on the line when it comes to us athletes getting ready to fight. You look at the NFL, those guys want more money because we have a short opportunity to make as much money as possible. I'm only 30 now, and I had 10 years. I've fought for the UFC since 2011. So what was that, 5 years I've competed in the UFC, and I've been a champion for almost 4 years. I can't retire right now. So if I was an NFL player and I played 4 years and won a Super Bowl 4 times in a row, I guarantee I can fucking retire. So it's, you're starting to see a lot of fighters like, we want more money so we can be able to retire eventually, instead of we get 38 years old and we're like, all right, I think Costco has openings.
Yeah. And obviously, a lot of these people are sort of complaining about their contracts and stuff like that. And you hear you saying, "Hey, $2 million for Dominick Cruz," and it makes it kind of sound. I guess to some people, like, oh, Demetrious Johnson, he is money focused, but it sounds like you're not one of those guys who's ever really going to complain about his contract. Are you happy with where you are at the moment in UFC and what you're making?
Absolutely. Like I said, I came from a job where I was making $20,000 a year, $23,000 a year, and I was working every single day. So I'm absolutely grateful for the UFC giving me the opportunity to make this type of money. I don't think there's another job out in the world that I can make this type of money. And they've given me opportunity to provide a life for my family that, I never had. So for me, I'm absolutely happy with it. And, I got a great contract. I got the best in the business, Matt Hume, doing all my negotiating. So nobody fucks with Matt Hume.
Yeah, if he's sitting across from you in the negotiating table, you're going to give him what he's asking for. You mentioned that money is not as much of an object for you or an issue for you anymore. Is it still $2 million to fight Dominick Cruz? Or now, with this new perspective, would you take a smaller paycheck to do the super fight?
Absolutely. I think $2 million is fair. I think it's $2 million. You look at, obviously, we don't have the same fan base. We're not Prom King or Prince or Duke or whatever, like, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz are. But, I tell you what, our skill set and what we've done in the past as mixed martial artists in this sport, Dominick Cruz has defended his belt more times than Conor McGregor has, and Conor McGregor's been more active than Dominick Cruz has been more active than Conor McGregor has. So that right there, just what we bring to the table as our as athletes and what we've done in this sport, I think that deserves $2 million, especially since the UFC's got bought for $4.2 billion. WME and IMG have the cash to front this fight. So I talked to Dominick Cruz about it face to face. Me and Dominick Cruz, we're cool. There's no bad blood between us. We're just two great athletes that want to be able to make the most money as possible, and hopefully the super fight will eventually happen.
It's interesting because you said you spoke to Dominick Cruz and you mentioned WME IMG. You've also spoken about how you mentioned to Lorenzo Fertitta about this $2 million. Have you spoken to the most important people, and that's the new owners, Ari Emanuel or anyone like that?
Yeah, I spoke to them before, but we never talked about, they just got a hold of the company. So
Sure.
I think, they just got a hold of the company, and, they haven't even seen me perform yet. So with that being said, obviously, we got the Ultimate Fighter fight first. And if everything goes well in that fight, then hopefully we fight again. And when we get to that 11, when I break the record, we go talk, and I'm like, yo, do you guys want a super fight? I believe this is truly a super fight to where, I am the smaller guy going up to, 135. And you have, a guy who walks around maybe 165 coming down to 135 to meet at 135, and we're going to fight. This is truly a super fight. If you guys want this fight to happen, this is my price. If you don't, I'll keep whooping ass at 125. That's how negotiation goes for me. Like, this is what I want. You guys have an agenda. This is my agenda. If you guys have a problem with me wanting to retire eventually one day from putting my body on the line for 7-8 years for this company, all right, then let's make it happen. If we don't see eye to eye, then okay, I can keep doing other things that are going to make me successful.
Well, I mean, you mentioned those other things. That's the thing. WME, IMG, obviously they're, firmly rooted in the entertainment business. And you say you can't see another, career where you make this kind of money. Have you considered sort of doing other entertainment things? Luke Rockhold's doing modeling, Ronda Rousey's doing movies. Have you thought about doing anything like that? Maybe if WME, IMG get behind your Twitch, that could, do something different. Or you being in movies. Have you thought about doing that once you retire?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. I don't want to just sit on my ass, when I retire from fight. I want to be active, whether it's, I already know I'm going to be involved in video games some way. I'm already got great connections, with Blizzard. I had a great connection with Ben Guy, doing a lot of things around TwitchCon. So with that being said, if things, open up for the door, like, hey, we want, a badass small black actor to be, not a stuntman, but, in action movies, like The Expendables 8, who knows? And I'm one of the guys, absolutely I'm down for that. I talked to Tyron Willie about that whole, aspect of, acting, and he says, he's passionate about it, and that's one thing he loves to do. And that can be something I love to do as well, if I get a chance to actually do it.
Yeah. And while we're talking about the new owners, we have to ask about Ari Emanuel. Is there a real life Lloyd? Were you around long enough to see if there was a Lloyd? And if there is a Lloyd, what is the person's real name? Yeah, we have to get the scoop here.
Hey, what do you mean Lloyd? Are you referring to him as let me think, Entourage, the character Entourage? Yeah. Every time I see him, he's always on the phone, jumping on it and say, I need this or whatever. So yeah, it's the real thing, man.
All right. Well, let's quickly find your thoughts out about Joseph Benavidez and Henry Cejudo. Those two guys are supposed to fight each other as well. Would you be open to fighting the winner of that fight again, or is it a situation where you've already been there before and it's not that interesting for you?
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, like I said, I fight whoever the UFC wants me to fight. So with that being said, if they want me to fight the winner of Joseph and Henry Cejudo, then by God on me, let's do it. There's a lot of guys. I mean, Louis Smokey, he's I think the only person in the actual division who actually has a legit win streak, like 4 or 5 fights, is I think Louis, maybe? I have no idea. Sergio Pettis is there. So for me, like I said, man, I'm all about just fighting, staying healthy, and then put on great performances.
Well, let me ask you, who do you think wins out of that? When you fought both guys before, Henry Cejudo, Joseph Benavidez, who do you think is going to come out on top there?
It's hard to say, man. Joseph's been around the sport forever, and he has a lot of tools. So win this fight, he's got a submission, he has knockout power. And Henry Cejudo, he's still kind of fresh to the sport. It just shows you that he's such a great athlete that he can just, beat Formiga, who's been in the sport forever. He's beat Chris Carriazo. And so we'll have to see tune in.
All right, Demetrious. Well, before we let you go, we have to let the fans and the gamers know, what are you playing these days on Twitch? Give us an update. Hey, we're playing World of Warcraft Legion, just dropped on August 30th. I'll probably hit level 110 tonight on the Rogue, rocking Assassination spec. And then I'm also playing H1Z1. So I've been playing that. I might be getting the H1Z1 Invitational for TwitchCon. So I hope that happens. But those are the two main games that I'm playing right now.
And just quickly, we heard that you and Max Holloway, got it on in Street Fighter. Do you wanna tell the lovely people who came out on top there?
Oh shit, 9-1. This guy right here, I gave one round. It was a good time. Max Holloway's also a streamer. Go give Max Holloway a follow. It's Blessed MMA on Twitch. He's starting to get his community going, the Brodies, or the Blessed crew. And it's good, man. We had a great time, playing, merging our communities together, because I have, the Mighty Squad. He has the Blessed Squad. It's a great way to build a fan base.
I love it. You guys are like the UN of gaming. And, of course, you guys can check out Mighty Mouse's Twitch channel, Twitch TV/Mighty Mouse. UFC 125 is always on there, always doing great things, always interacting with everybody. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, make sure you do that at Mighty Mouse UFC. Demetrious, it is always a pleasure and honor chatting to you, man. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everybody, this is Tyron, the Chosen One Woodley. You are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is a former UFC champion coming off a big win at UFC 200. He has hunting skills. Many people think he's the real-life Rambo. Joins us here on Submission Radio. TJ Dillashaw, welcome back to the program, man.
Oh, thanks for having me on again, man.
It's always great to have you. Now, we know that there's been some big life changes in your life. You got your first tattoo, and now you're officially inked. What was that like, man? Tell us about it.
Yeah, man. I've been wanting to get some tats for a long time. I've had some ideas for a while, but I'm actually glad that I've waited as long as I have, man. I was able to afford a good artist and knew what I really wanted. So I got a whole sleeve design, but you know how it goes. You can only do piece by piece. So hopefully I'll get a little more work done here in the next month and add to it. I'm pretty excited.
Now let's talk about some of the earlier options you would have gone with if you were younger. I know I went through a few phases. I was going to get some tribal stuff. I was going to get a naked lady. I was going to get some crazy stuff. Now I look back on it all and I'm like, look, I'm just happy I didn't get anything. Did you have any crazy ideas back in the younger days that you're happy you didn't go with?
Yeah, I drew some stuff up when I was in college. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but it was definitely going to be stupid. So I'm glad I didn't do it. And there's no way I could have afforded a good artist. So I would have regretted the decision for sure. I have a lot of friends that would get drunk on spring break or, grad week or something, and end up getting a tattoo. And I was always glad that I wasn't one of those guys because it never turned out well, But at least there's a story from it.
So what is the story? For those who haven't seen, it's of course on your Instagram. It looks like there's a clock with certain numbers sort of highlighted. And I don't know whether it's a moth or a wasp or some kind of killer butterfly, something. What's the story? What's the meaning behind this one?
The clock's not done completely, but it's the race against time. It's a bunch of clocks all mushed together. And just kind of like life and with my career, the race against time, trying to beat time before, and then the thing that was a moth is actually it's a hybrid of a butterfly and a bee. It's got butterfly wings, but it's a bee's body for Muhammad Ali. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. And then on the top of my arm, I got a lion with his paw out right now, and his paw is going to be on top of the globe, like he's trying to be the king of the world, man. Trying to get my belt back.
Wow.
I like it. And what's the next step? Are we going to be going for a whole sleeve here? Are you going for the full cover?
Yeah, I'm going for a full sleeve. I'll probably add a couple more butterfly bees throughout it. I got to finish the clock off. Got to finish the lion off. I'm going to add some scenery back from my hometown on my arm. I'm going to put the Roman Colosseum. I'm going to put a samurai with the Japanese sun behind him. I got some Greek mythology I'm going to put on my arm. A word that I've lived my life by, my career by, is arete, the pursuit of excellence, mentally, spiritually, physically. And just I think it kind of defines my career mainly, just all aspects of life and my career.
That's a lot to fit in. Are we going to the back and the chest and the other arm, TJ?
No, man. I kind of like, instead of having like one big illustration, I kind of like more of a collage. Like a bunch of stuff kind of hidden into the sleeve. So there'll be a lot of it kind of mashed in there. So it's it's a little bit hidden instead of just one big illustration, like I said.
Well, the Submission Radio logo, TJ, I don't know if you've seen this beast, but it would look quite nice. I'm thinking somewhere along the neck area, somewhere like that would be good, or maybe on the face. But we'll send you some designs.
It's visible at all times, I'm sure, right?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking just a few times, maybe like a few times throughout the sleeve, just in case people don't see it from the first angle. But look, we'll discuss that later. I want to be reasonable about this. Another huge moment that you had between the last time that we spoke to you is you had an infamous run-in with Manny the Frenchie. who has 1 million
Oh, yeah.
followers on Instagram, may we add. Now you got to give us the scoop. Has fame gone to his little doggy head, or is he a bit of a doggy diva now?
Oh, dude, he's definitely a doggy diva. He's awesome. I had 2 French bulldogs, so I've been a fan of Manny the Frenchie for a while now on Instagram. And his owner and Manny reached out to me through some of my fights, and we've become pretty close. And so I got to go out and meet him. And we're actually doing a little charity signing tour in Denver at the beginning of October. He's gonna come out and kick it in Denver. But the dog's definitely a spoiled man. He can't be left alone, and eats nothing but the best food. He's spoiled to all means.
Now, obviously, TJ, you're ranked number 1 under the champ in the official UFC rankings. Got to ask you, man, the biggest thing that we want to know, have you heard anything from the UFC about you having the next title shot against Dominick Cruz, getting that rematch?
Nothing officially. Nothing's been signed. Nothing's been officially agreed upon. I heard that he won't be ready till the end of the year. He's dealing with some injuries he's got that he's got to heal up before he'll be able to fight. And so, I'm thinking that's my next fight, man. That's what I'm waiting for. The way I think it should work, the way it should be working as a sport is what happens when number 1 beats number 2. There's nowhere for him to go but up. So I just beat Rafael Cincao. He was the number 2 ranked fighter. I was the number 1 ranked fighter underneath the champion. I think it's only fair that my next fight is for my belt.
Well, I mean, you say he's healthy by the end of the year. I mean, there's a Sacramento card, I believe, mid to early December. What about something like that?
That'd be amazing, man. Absolutely, for sure.
When you hear that Dominick Cruz is healing up from a few injuries, do you worry a little bit? Because we know he's had a rough history of injuries. He's been out for a while. We don't know exactly what those injuries are, but does a part of you worry that they may be more serious than he let on, or something else might happen, or this fight might be delayed for longer than you'd expect? Anything along those lines?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think about those things, and that's why I want to fight him sooner rather than later, before I don't get that chance to get my win back, get that win back that I felt I should have had. It's get my belt back and beat a guy that, he's one of the best in the world. So I want to get that opportunity to get that belt back. And yeah, it's definitely worrisome that he might never ever come back. He's had some serious injuries, was out for 4 years, and you never know when that's going to happen again. The sport that we're in, that shit can happen any day, and you got to be prepared for it.
Wow, never, ever. That's, I guess, extreme. Do you genuinely worry that he would never come back to the sport and never fight again?
Nah, just not to that point. He should be, but you never know. Someone could break their neck tomorrow in practice. You never know what's going to happen. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that I actually get my shot to fight Cruz again. I think we make a great matchup, and really, realistically, I think I'm the only one in the weight class that beats him right now.
It's an interesting and tough situation that we're sort of in at the moment, where we see guys like Wonderboy Thompson finding themselves at the top of the ladder, yet not getting that title shot guaranteed. Is it frustrating to you that on paper you should technically be fighting Cruz because you're ranked number 1, but nothing yet is really guaranteed?
Yeah, man, it's definitely frustrating. It's a crazy sport, and the UFC's allowed to do what they want because they have such a monopoly on the sport. They're able to make whatever fights they want to make. So you always got that in the back of your mind. But after talking to him after I lost to Cruz, and everyone thinking that I had won that fight, and I thought I was going to get the instant rematch, and they ended up going with Faber. I just don't see them doing that to me again. I don't see them putting me on the sidelines and not giving me that fight. I feel like it's the right thing to do, and I think they know it as well. So I think they're just trying to figure out when Cruz is going to be able to get healthy, and then we'll line that thing up.
It sounds like you're pretty sure that, you will get this next shot. Have you sort of tried calling Dana or reaching out to anyone from the UFC? Have you spoken to anybody to see what's going on? And also, why do you sort of think the company seems hesitant in giving you the title shot and just confirming it and making it official?
Well, like I said, Dom's injured. They don't even know exactly when he's going to be back, so you can't sign a contract and say, yeah, you're fighting Dominick. What if, like we were talking about, what if he doesn't come back in anytime soon? Then I do have to fight someone else. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest holdup on maybe me signing the fight right now. What was the other part? When then getting a hold of Dana and stuff. It's been a little bit difficult with them selling the company and doing the whole buyout, and seems like they've been pretty busy with finishing the whole final steps of that. So I'm looking to hear back from them here in the next few weeks and get this whole thing locked down, because trust me, I don't want to deal with all this stress of worrying about getting a fight and who I'm fighting next. So I want it done sooner rather than later.
Hey, speaking of that new company obviously owning the UFC now, Do you worry that because it's firmly planted in the entertainment industry, the sport's only going to go further in that direction of super fights and top-ranked guys not getting the title shot next?
Man, I really hope not. I mean, if they start doing that, I feel like it's gonna ruin the sport. At least ruin the UFC a little bit if they can continue to do that. I mean, you always have the fans that are gonna watch the entertainment and watch that bullshit. But I got into this thing because it was a sport. I got into it because I love the competition. I love being out there man on man and seeing who the baddest guy in the world is. And not who's gonna be able to create the most drama and talk the most shit. It's more about who is the baddest man on the planet at your weight class. And I hope they don't ruin that.
I'm just wondering.
I like the days of when it was Chuck Liddell and those guys they don't have to go out and talk much shit. They go out there and prove it with their hands and go out there and knock everyone out. I mean, I feel like that's the way the sport should be. The entertainment should be the fight, not all the drama beforehand and all the fake bullshit.
I was going to say, are you a little bit disillusioned by all that? Because it definitely seems like it's heading in that direction, potentially even more so than ever. You've got guys like, say, GSP and Nick Diaz, and they may be fighting for the title shot as opposed to guys like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And then yourself, we know that you're a competitive guy and you're all about sort of the pure sport. Are you a little bit disillusioned at the moment, about it?
Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, I hope it doesn't happen. I really don't. But that'll also make me, I think, more unique in the sport if I stick to my guns and don't break character and kind of be the aggressive professional. I mean, be aggressive inside the octagon, but professional outside, and build the fan base off of that because that's the fans I'd rather have anyways. I don't want to be worrying about breaking character and having to force myself to talk crap to someone when I don't feel like it's right. I mean, I don't mind not liking someone and having some animosity, but I'm not going to go out of my way to act like a diva to get it,
You might have to start throwing bottles at press conferences. But look, let's look at the division. There's a couple of guys.
That shit was funny, dude. That was so ridiculous.
Hey, it was funny to you. We were there, and Adam Hill almost had his eye taken out. Imagine that. Jake Shields threw a cup of coffee. That was wild as well. So it was like
chucking
a
water
battlefront.
bottles at each other across the press conference.
It was like the opening scene from Saving Private Ryan. People were picking up cups all over the ground and trying to figure out what's next to their life. But let's look at the division. There's a couple of guys pushing for the title shot as well. The first is your former opponent, John Dodson. He's taken on John Lineker on October 1st. And with a previous stoppage win over you, some people are saying he should get the next title shot if he wins. What do you think about those comments, and what would your response be to those people who are saying that?
Everyone's going to campaign for themselves to try to get that belt. That's the ultimate goal, But when my one argument, the only argument needed is that I'm the number one ranked fighter in the division, and I just beat the number 2 ranked fighter in the division. That's the only argument I need. There should be nothing else behind it. 1 beats 2, he should fight for the belt. I mean, that's the way a bracket works. That's the way seedings work. This is a real sport. Why not treat it like it?
I'm just wondering, though, if for whatever reason the UFC were, for some reason, going to swing that way, do you think Dodson would sort of have a chance against Cruz if they did set that up?
No, I don't think Dodson's got the cardio. I think he gets too tired. I think Demetrious has proven what he can do to Dodson. And Dodson, he's got some power behind his punches, but it doesn't last very long. He's a real defensive counter puncher, and he's kind of flat-footed. He throws fast. But no, I don't think he's got a chance. Got to be a little more well-rounded, have a little bit better of a ground game and some wrestling to beat Dominick, and he's also got to have a better cardio. I mean, Cruz is dancing around the entire fight, and he's never going to give you a chance to break. So I think Dodson would not have a chance now.
Well, your first fight between you and Dodson was back in 2011. How do you think a rematch would go if you guys had to fight each other now?
Oh, man, I'm a completely different fighter. I only had 4 fights under my belt when I fought Dodson. I mean, I was strictly a wrestler coming out of college and a little overconfident as well. I thought I was invincible, was running through some guys and did well on the show and was, I think, a 3-1 favorite over Dodson and just kind of, came in a little bit. My hands weren't as good as they are now and just came in a little too aggressive, and so many things I'm able to fix and to add on to. And, yeah, it would be a completely different fight. I would pick them apart in my mind.
Looking over obviously the division, the other man with a lot of momentum behind him is your former teammate Cody Garbrandt. Obviously, he's ranked 6th. It doesn't compare to your number 1, but there's a lot of trash talk and bad blood between him and Cruz that obviously brings a lot of interest to the fight. I know that you sort of say that the number 1 should get it, obviously, but he seems like your biggest competition of getting that title shot. Do you worry when you see him and Cruz going back and forth so much and fans wanting to see that matchup?
Yeah, I do actually, because it's funny. So as soon as Cruz was calling out Faber and didn't want to fight me, you know, I understood whatever that happened. And then as soon as that fight was over, Cruz was talking about how he wants to do a super fight against Aldo. Well, Aldo wants McGregor, so that wasn't going to happen. Then he was saying he wanted to do a super fight against Demetrious, but Demetrious was hurt and already had a fight lined up, so he couldn't do that either. So if he couldn't run away from the weight class to not fight me, what's he going to do, jump to number 8? You know, we'd rather fight a number 8 ranked guy instead of fighting the guy he should fight. You know, I think he just doesn't want to fight me, man. He knows how tough that first fight was. He knows that I have a legitimate chance of kicking his ass, and he just doesn't want that to happen. He wants to try to make as much money as he can while he can and stay on top. But you know, I'm motivated more now than ever to get my belt back, and he knows that, man. I'm coming for it. So he's gonna do that. I think that's the biggest thing that worries me the most. He's gonna do as much trash talk as he can to try to entice people to about this Garbrandt fight, so that he can try to stay on top, because he knows he's gonna be able to pick Garbrandt apart as well too. You know, that guy's a little bit too flat-footed for Cruz. Cruz knows what he's doing. He's smart, man. He gets under people's skins. He picks the fights that he wants. You know, I mean, he just got to fight Uriah Faber, made him look like a fool, and he knew that fight was going to go that way when he should have been fighting me instead.
What do you think of Cody's recent success and run so far? Have you been impressed with what the guy's been able to do? Do you think he's done enough to get a title shot against Cruz?
He definitely shouldn't get a title shot yet. There's no way. I mean, he can get a title shot once I get my belt back, you know, and he can fight me for the belt. But no, he does not deserve the title shot yet. I mean, they're giving him matchups that are perfect for him. I was impressed with him beating Thomas Almeida the way he did, you know, but Almeida came out with the wrong game plan. I mean, Garbrandt's kind of one-dimensional, and once you know that, it's a little bit different kind of game, you know. The kid's good though. He's athletic. He hits hard. You know, I got no beef with him other than him trying to push for my belt right now. You know, I guess that's the only kind of beef I got. But yeah, he doesn't deserve a shot.
Cody spoke prior to UFC 202, and he said that he has a hit list. Cruz, yourself, then John Lineker. First off, what do you think about your name being on there? And also, why do you think you're so high on this list?
Because I'm the best in the world, man. I mean, he knows that. He knows that he's going to have to face me if he's going to want to push for that belt. He's going to have to fight me. You know, I mean, he's calling out Cruz because he's the champ, and he knows that I'm up there. You know, I mean, the way I see it is if he's going to be fighting for the belt, it's going to be against me. So I'm not surprised with me being on that list.
Sports Illustrated Mike Dice wrote a great article about Garbrandt titled The Next Bantamweight King. I'm not sure if you saw it, but how do you feel about a sentiment like that? And is part of you a bit annoyed that while you're ranked number 1 and are coming off, a really good win, some people aren't really talking about Dillashaw being the future of the division? Do you feel like, some people may have forgotten a bit?
You know, man, this sport is crazy, and everyone's going to campaign for who they like and what they want. You know, this sport's insanely crazy. So I have 2 split decision losses on my record since I lost to Dotson, and whenever year that was. After my loss to Dotson, I went on a streak. I've got 2 split decision losses, once to Ascensal and once to Cruz. Both I think should have went in my favor. If those fights would have been in my favor, I'd be on an 11-fight win streak right now and be on top of the world, And it's crazy how quick things can change just by some bullshit decisions by the judges and me not getting the recognition I deserve, I mean, I could be on this giant win streak and continuing it to have the longest win streak in UFC history eventually, but that's not the way it goes down. You got to roll with the punches and continue to work hard and just be hungry. Things will work out the way they're supposed to. And, I'm setting up my life outside the octagon as well and doing great things. And, this isn't going to be the only thing that my life's about is fighting. And so I'm going to ride this wave and do some great things with it. Just got to be humble along the way.
As far as Cruz and obviously his injuries, and we don't know when he'll be back, if you have to take a fight sort of in the interim, would you? And do you have a preference whether you'd be fighting, say, Garbrandt or Dodson?
No, I don't care who it is. I mean, if I'm going to take another fight, the only way I'm going to take another fight is if it is for an interim because Cruz can't come back. If Cruz is healthy, that's the only fight I want. If for some reason they're going to give up an interim belt, then yeah, I mean, I'll fight, and I don't care who it is. I mean, the thing is, I just want my belt back, man. I mean, I don't care who's in my way. I believe I'm the best in the world, so it doesn't matter who I fight to get it, really.
So let's say for some reason the UFC gives the title shot to someone else. Will you sit out and wait till you get the next title shot? Are you in a position where you just sort of fed up with everything and what's going on? You're just going to wait till you get the next title shot if someone else gets the next shot instead of you?
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm going to have to think about. I mean, I'm trying to trying to play The Secret right now. If you guys have ever read that book, just kind of visualize that I'm getting the fight against Cruz, and that's all I can really think about right now. I got to think positively. That's what's going to happen. But, if I don't get that shot, I don't know, man. I mean, I might just wait for my shot back at the belt. I don't think I think I should be leapfrogged at all. And, like I'm saying, if this is a true sport and not the WWE, I'm the next title shot.
I want to ask you about some of your other sort of plans that you have outside of the sport that you mentioned before. But just before we do, I just want to ask you something else, TJ. There was some news obviously recently regarding Luke Rockhold's comments about how the money the UFC offering him is bullshit. He's of course referring to the fact that he went from being a champion, getting a certain level of money, and now one fight after the loss, his deal is subsequently substantially less, even though he's a former champion, one of the biggest stars in the division. In your case, it was reported that you went from having 70 to show, 70 to win, 1,000 to just earning 25 and 25. How badly did that aspect bother you, and does Rockhold have a point?
Yeah, it does got a point, man. I mean, it does suck. I do feel that we're a higher commodity than that. I think the UFC is the UFC because of the fighters, and I'm hoping they start realizing that and start paying us what we deserve. I mean, that company just sold for $4 billion. It kind of shows the value of the fighters. I mean, we make that organization, I mean, if you don't have the best fighters in the world, you don't have the best organization. So, yeah, I'm hoping it swings around, and I'm sure there's going to be more guys continue to complain, especially when you see some bigger pay cuts going out to some of these bigger names. But he's definitely got a point, man.
Yeah, because
that's why you got to set yourself up outside the octagon and not rely on the support solely. You got to be a hard worker inside and outside the octagon, man.
Yeah, well, you said not too long ago that you had plans to talk about your contract. Have you had that talk yet? And has it been with the new owners by any chance?
So that's what's been the holdup is letting them finish up their deal with the whole buyout. So I'm just kind of waiting on that and hoping for the best, man. Just going to continue to grind and stay motivated, and hopefully good things happen.
Well, obviously you're being positive at the moment. It sounds like you're sort of setting yourself up outside of the UFC, outside of fighting. Can you talk about some of those things? Because it sounds like you've got something cooking up.
Yeah, I mean, I got some big things right now in the works that I'm hoping that pan out. I'm not going to go out and say them before they happen because I don't want to give starts talking about shit that doesn't happen. But things I do have already. I got a woodworking company that I started up with my brother-in-law and some friends back home. It's Murphy's Woodworks. We sell custom furniture and wood slab tables and some pretty cool stuff. It was a hobby that's turned into a business. That's pretty cool. It's a fun thing to be behind. I've teamed up with my nutritionist, Perfecting Athletes. These ladies are amazing, and I've realized the difference they've done with me and been able to not only help me with my weight, but help me with my hormone levels through my diet and just how smart they are with their medicine. And I've teamed up with them to get back involved with the wrestling community and help out with California USA Wrestling, which is also helping us pushing to start some charities and traveling around and, start helping out some vets and some youth that are the underprivileged youth. And hopefully you're going to be getting a grant from the government to be able to do more work like that, be able to do some more charity work, which, it pays off, but it also makes you feel good to be able to give back to lower income companies and also people that have served our country. I'm really big into wanting to help out any kind of veterans, current and past. Anything I could do to help boost their morale, show them how to eat and train like a professional athlete, and just kind of show them the appreciation I feel that they deserve. And so that's another big thing I got going on right now. And then a couple other big things in the works I'm hoping pan out. And if they do, then I'll be sitting pretty.
Well, there's going to be some exciting stuff now. TJ, we really appreciate the time. But before we let you go, what's the message? Cruz and Cody have had their time to sort of speak in the spotlight recently. Do you have any messages for Dominick Cruz, your fans, the UFC, anybody listening right now? What's your message to them?
I guess my main message is just to the MMA fans. Don't let Cruz fool you by trying to talk shit to Garbrandt because he's trying to push for an easier fight for himself. Let's look at this as a true sport. Let's get the baddest man on the planet to fight. See who the best fighter is. Me and Cruz had a great fight, very close. Obviously I thought I won that fight, but it was a very good close fight. And let's see you actually just give me that chance to prove that I won that fight.
Well, there you go, guys. There he is. TJ Dillashaw. Make sure to follow him on Twitter and Instagram at TJ Dillashaw. A lot of interesting stuff, and also we see you working on a new logo, TJ, so make sure to go down, check out that logo, give your thoughts to TJ, and help him obviously finalize the design. We look forward to seeing what happens next, TJ. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate it.
Always, guys. Always a good time to be on the show.
Hi, this is Gunnar Nelson, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Alrighty, guys, it's a crazy, crazy weekend in MMA. UFC 203 just wrapping up, and there's a lot to talk about. And for this, we have a man that hasn't been on the show in quite some time. It's such a pleasure to have him back on the program. You know him from Fansided, Extra Rounds podcast, and his great articles on mixedmartialarts.com. A longtime friend of the show. So happy to have him back on here. Elias Cepeda, welcome back to Submission Radio, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. I was bummed we didn't get to hang out again at UFC 202. I didn't make it out there, so it's been too long, man. Happy to be on.
Well, last time we hung out, we were having a buffet, talking about fights, things that were going on. Things were crazy then. Things are crazy now once again. No food in front of us, but so much stuff to talk about. So we're going to kick it off by talking about the main event from the preliminary card, UFC 203, Bethe Correia versus Jessica Eye. Now, Elias, I want to go to you first, man. I want to get your thoughts on Jessica's performance. What did you think of the way she performed in front of a hometown crowd? And what did you think of the decision? Did you agree with Bethe actually winning the fight?
You know, I had it scored. I didn't actually, I should say, I didn't properly score it, but I thought that Jessica won. I thought it was a pretty close fight in terms of like total strikes landed and significant strikes and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought Jessica fought well. I can't imagine what it feels like to fight on national television in front of a home crowd. So I think she did well, and I thought she did enough to earn a decision in a close fight, personally.
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of jump in. I don't think either way you could really call this a robbery. I think when you look at Bethe's performance against Raquel Pennington in her last fight, I had a feeling that this was going to be a close fight either way, and I kind of thought that this may actually be the fight of the night. And in every sense, it wasn't. It was a bit of a lackluster fight. It wasn't really that inspiring. And as far as the scorecards go, I mean, I can definitely see how either fighter won. It really comes down to the second round. I think Jessica Eye won the first one. The third one was definitely Bethe. And then the second one, it was like Bethe had a good start. Eye had a good end. Like I said, I don't think you can really say that it's a robbery either way. But I think, while Bethe is getting a little bit better, she's still definitely not in that elite competition level. And I think Eye, unfortunately, just a little bit underwhelming. And I don't know if we'll see her in the UFC after this. This is officially her fourth loss in a row.
Casper brings up a good point. Elias, what do you think? Fourth loss in a row. And it really looked like in this fight she was a bit reserved. Like she just couldn't get things going. She was a bit tense. She wasn't very loose. In a lot of ways, Bethe was a little bit like that as well at 10 parts of the fight. Do you think, Elias, that the pressure of losing this fight sort of got to her? And do you think we'll see a fight again in the UFC?
I hope we do. I think when she's at her best, she's able to fight competitively with the best. Obviously, Bethe Correia got blown out in her title fight, but she's a former world title challenger, and Jessica, went to a close fight with her, even though it wasn't like exciting. I can only imagine that, having 3 straight losses and then having a hometown crowd can freeze you up a little bit. I don't know if that was the case. It may have just been being wary of your opponent, but I don't know. I think Jessica, she had a good fight with Miocic Tate that she was winning. I thought, early on, or certainly at least threatened to finish. I think she's had close fights with top fighters in the division, from Sarah McMahon to Miocic Tate, Juliana Pena. So it's a tough situation where you've got a losing streak, where you've got close or at least good competitive fights that don't go your way against the best of the best. Like, I hate to see someone punished for, even if though they're clearly in the top 10. That would be weird to not be in the UFC if you're in the top 10, and I think Jessica has that ability. But certainly it's a possibility, right, if you've lost 4 in a row. I hope she gets another chance.
I'm with you there. I mean, Miocic Tate, Juliana Pena, Sarah McMahon, all top fighters. I'm not yet sold on Bethe Correia. I think she's definitely still a work in progress. Even though you could look at the fight with Raquel Pennington and say, hey, but that was a close fight, and you could potentially say that, you could argue whether she won it or not. I think that with Raquel, she really didn't fight to the best of her ability in that fight. And, even, you mentioned the title shot for Betch. I think her road was sort of a fairly, I don't want to be disrespectful, but kind of an easy one. Julie Kedzie, Jessamine Duke, and then Shayna Baszler. And then, like you mentioned, she got blown out of the water by Ronda Rousey, comes back to lose against Raquel Pennington. I think this was the fight that Jessica needed to win. I'm definitely not for anyone being cut, but, if I was sort of looking into a crystal ball, I think that might be what's happening. And I actually think both fighters kind of looked like, they fought as if their job was on the line. I think with Jessica she's got a lot of things happening. Her father passed away, I believe, in June or July. That's got to be fresh off her mind. She's been seeing the sports psychologist, and I think the added pressure of not knowing whether you're going to be, sort of still with the company and with a job after this fight, I don't know, it may have gotten to her.
Well, I mean, for me, I still have a lot of interest in her. I think a lot of fans have a lot of interest in her. So there's still something UFC can do with her. But whether or not they choose to give her another fight, that'll be interesting. Another interesting thing is just the evolution of the division. I mean, before, like you mentioned, Cass, Betch beat some fighters who maybe aren't near the quality of the top of the division that we have now. You look at the division now compared to back when Betch made a victory streak and got to the title shot. Now there's some really, really tough women up the top of the top 10 division. So it's really interesting to see the evolution of the division and some of the advances of skill that we're seeing happening in front of us. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, interested to see what happens with the next. No doubt, though, the Cleveland crowd loves us. So if they do another event there back for Stipe, which you think they would because apparently it was super successful over there, they'd want to have her and put her somewhere on the card. Let's talk about the main card there. Jessica Andrade defeated Joanne Calderwood via guillotine choke in the first round. Elias, were you surprised by this? Were you going for Andrade in this one, or did you think that Calderwood was going to beat her?
I was kind of split coming in. I definitely was surprised by how quickly a finish happened, though. So I was definitely surprised. That the guillotine, I was like, oh, I don't know if she has an angle, and clearly she had what she needed. So I was definitely surprised by the finish, even though I didn't have like a clear pick going in. Very, very impressive to win off your back on the bottom at this level is a very tough thing to do.
I mean, JoJo unfortunately continues to sort of be a little bit underwhelming. I thought this may have actually been the fight of the night between these two. The thing is with JoJo, she looked really, really good in her last performance against Valerie Letourneau. Unfortunately, that was at 125, and now going back to 115. She just doesn't really seem quite as strong, quite as good as she does at 125, and obviously Andrade coming down from 135. I think a lot of people thought JoJo would be able to keep her away, keep her at distance with those kicks, and when you think about Andrade coming down for 135 and the women and the size there, and she didn't really have any issues there closing the distance, the fight didn't really surprise me, except for the fact that it was so quick. But here we have someone like JoJo who was supposed to be sort of a contender, sort of slipping, but now we've got Andrade who's proving to be a force in the division, which is actually really exciting.
And Andrade now 2 wins since her debut in the strawweight division, both finishes. Elias, what do you think the UFC should do with her next? She's got a lot of potential. She's clearly very successful in the weight class. Is there anyone in your mind who you think she would match up well next with?
It's so tough in this division for me. It's like I feel like the upcoming rising prospects, it's tough to know what to do with them. I feel like you could either be on the rise or you can be rushed into like the top 3 or 4 fights with the top 3 or 4. And it's tough to do that unless if you want to keep someone along as a prospect and keep them developing. I feel my take is, I don't know that they'll do this. They don't do a whole lot of this, but I think someone like her, deserves the type of treatment where the UFC perhaps looks for good matchups for her. Not gimme fights, but things where she can go out there, continue to get experience, develop, possibly put on a show if things go her way, and then you have another rising star with a really good win streak a couple fights from now. From another market, an emerging market. So I hope they don't rush her into the top 2 or 3, in the division, because I think over time, if she can continue to develop, she may be one day like a legitimate title contender. But if you rush her into a fight that she's not ready for, it could really just hamper her progress, her development, and limit promotional options for the UFC.
I think the only other thing is with those options, you look at the division, you've got, Joanna Jędrzejczyk obviously as the champion, Karolina Kowalkiewicz as the next contender, and then afterwards it's like, well, who's next? Rose Namajunas lost, Carla Esparza, I don't think they're going to do that rematch ever. Claudia Gaday just lost, and then you got Tisha Torres. You could potentially do a Jessica Andrade Tisha Torres fight, and the winner of that fight goes for the title. You could give a Rose Namajunas. I think as a fight fan, that'd be a really exciting fight. The only issue there is if you do have Rose win, you've just derailed Andrade, and I don't know about the level of excitement between a Rose Namajunas fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk at this point, purely just because she lost to Carolina at this point. So I would be in favor of Jessica Andrade against Tisha Torres.
Yeah, I mean, a fight with Carla Esparza could be okay. People aren't really sure where Esparza is at the moment. It could be a way for Esparza to prove that she's still obviously she's still relevant, but just to prove to everybody where she's at in her career and what's going on with her body and stuff like that. But I can see your point, Elias. You don't want to destroy stars too early, man. So I guess she's a victim of her own success, already ranked at number 6. So let's talk about a guy who's been on the show many a time, Uriah Faber, the California kid. Here he is, fights UFC 199 against Dominick Cruz. Doesn't have the greatest performance. Talks about possibly retiring, what's going to happen next. We're not sure what's going to happen next. And then bang, we see him on this card against Jimmy Rivera. Jimmy Rivera is not really a guy that too many casual fans know of. Obviously, he's had a spectacular run, back-to-back wins, heaps of back-to-back wins. And Uriah Faber decides to take that fight, which sort of shows you how much balls Uriah Faber has against a guy who's super tough that not that many people know of. And if he beats him, well, he doesn't really gain that much momentum. But if he loses, he sort of builds his guy's career. Elias, it was a bit of a tough night for the California kid. A lot of rough leg kicks. That Uriah Faber leg with the welts, man, that was just brutal to look at. But he was still there, still coming forward, still trying to do something. But alas, he lost. What did you think of the fight? What did you think of Jimmy Rivera's performance?
I thought Jimmy fought really well. He was really tactical. Like you said afterwards, you said, Uriah doesn't, I'm paraphrasing, Uriah doesn't check leg kicks, so I wanted to attack it, and he did. He went at the thigh, he went at the knee, he went at the calf. He was very effective with it. He also did a good job of staying out of Faber's punching range, and Faber likes to lean back and then counter with like quick one-shots. He fought really well, and he probably fought pretty blind for the last couple minutes of the fight. So I was super impressive. I thought like you guys were saying, like, Uriah Faber was impressive in just even taking the fight. He's a megastar in MMA who does not ask or demand like any type of megastar treatment. Why a guy that's in the top 2 or 3 in terms of title contention at bantamweight, just fighting a relatively unknown guy who's ranked in the top 10 or 15, that just shows Uriah Faber just likes to fight. And, I'm probably making money too, but he just likes to fight. He's willing to put himself in situations where even if he won, he would beat someone that he and hardcore fans know is really tough, but he wouldn't like get some gigantic boost up the rankings or anything like that. So Uriah Faber is a fighter's fighter. He's tough as can be. He's fought with 2 broken hands. He's fought in this fight, and even worse against Jose Aldo with busted up legs. The guy, clearly he loves this, and he's been at the top of several divisions for a very, very long time, which is especially impressive to do at a late age at lighter weight divisions like featherweight or bantamweight. So he's an amazing fighter. He could definitely stay competitive for a long time. It's just a matter of if he wants to continue to do this without vying for a title. He'll be an effective top tier fighter for quite a long time, but it would take a little bit for him to probably be able to fight for a title again. And for a guy that's always been at the top fighting for titles or being a champion, that's just something he's gonna have to decide whether or not it's worth it for him at this point, whether or not he's got the money to focus on other things. So it's tough to see him lose, but it's great to see him out there scrapping and hustling still, even to the final bell, trying to put himself in a position where he can win. But you got to give Rivera his due. He did great. This is a huge win for him, and he should be able to make the argument to people, hey guys, I'm in the top 5. Let me get some more big matchups.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy gets a massive rub from Uriah Faber. He talked about some of the fighters that turned down the fight against him. And, this outcome didn't really surprise me. Just stylistically, Jimmy is a really, really, tough guy. He's got very good defensive wrestling. And it kind of looked like if Faber isn't able to get him down, this is what the fight might look like. So kudos to Jimmy, who, is a character in on himself. And he got the rub. So I think now that he people know who he is, I think a lot of fighters will be sort of looking to take fights with him. I think there's probably a lot of fighters in the division that may look at him and say, like, look, I'm not impressed. I might be able to beat that guy. At least now people know who he is. So if I beat him, hey, at least I'm beating the guy who beat Uriah Faber. As far as Faber goes, I don't think he cares about the title. I think he's the type of guy where he won't ever turn down a title fight, and it's pretty much what he said on our show. And before the Cruz fight, we asked him, realistically, what happens if you lose this Cruz fight? What happens if you lose this title fight? And he basically, again, I'm going to sort of paraphrase, but he basically said it wouldn't bother him that much. He said he's got a great life, he's got good things going, he's had a good career, he's got good things going in the gym, he's financially set. I don't think Uriah Faber does this anymore to win a title. I think if he does it, it's kind of a bonus. I think he does it because he genuinely just enjoys it. Like you mentioned, he's a fighter's fighter, and he deserves a tremendous amount of respect for taking these fights, but I think it's just one of those things where if he stopped doing this, I kind of think he'd be bored. I kind of think, yeah, he'd have all these business ventures and things that he can work on, and yeah, sure, he could probably do other things that may even make him more money, with his management company and sponsorships and all those kinds of things, but I think he does it because he genuinely enjoys it and his body is still holding up. He may not be the same fighter that he was a few years ago. I think the decline is pretty noticeable. These fights that used to be somewhat easy wins for him if he wasn't fighting for a title, those are now getting a lot harder. Even some of his recent wins against, Caceres and Francisco Rivera, those aren't coming as easy as they used to. But considering he's a guy who, it's not like he's getting, brutally knocked out. It's not like a guy, say, like Overeem, who I'm not saying should retire, but has suffered numerous amount of knockouts, or say Bigfoot Silva, who a lot of people are saying should retire. Uriah's not really in that boat, so I definitely think he's going to continue. Whether he, gets more wins or not, I don't know. I definitely don't think he'll be fighting for a title anytime soon, but yeah, I think he'll be staying.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well, guys, where he's 37 years older. He sort of had a quick turnaround, wanted to get right back in there. I think in the back of his head he realizes, hey, at my age, maybe I got another year and a bit of fighting left before I can't physically do it. So I think he'll be smart to hang around, like you said, Casper, and just see what happens, who pulls out. If he can come in and be a main event in some kind of fight night card somewhere, there's always those sort of fights with legends that they could put together, some kind of BJ Penn, Uriah Faber fight or something like that. They can do something with him. And TJ Dillashaw, who knows, maybe TJ loses against Cruz again, and now they're looking for something for TJ to do, and they got that rivalry. So who knows what they're going to do with him, but I think he'll be smart if he's sticking around to maybe pick his next opponent a little bit better, maybe an opponent where with a bit of name value, someone that people want to see him fight. But I don't know about you guys, but do you think if he keeps taking fights with these guys sort of down the bottom of the division, do you want to see him go out this way? Do you want to sort of see him go out fighting guys like Jimmy Rivera? Would you rather see him start taking on some of the guys that have been around for a while, sort of bigger names, but, sort of easier fights, I suppose, more sort of showcase type fights? What do you think, Elias?
Yeah, that was actually exactly my thought afterwards. I said, if he wants it, I'd love for Uriah Faber, who's still a star and can bring eyeballs, to get on his own timetable one last fight that's maybe like a headlining FS1 card main event or a Fox UFC on Fox main event. I think it's unrealistic to have him headline a pay-per-view coming off of losses, but he could still, because of his star power, headline one of those cards against, and I don't have a name off the top of my head, maybe you all do, but against someone more his age, more his speed at this point, an easier fighter, perhaps that brings some name recognition where both guys have a good chance to get in there and have a shot at winning. I'd like to see that. I'd love to have him have one more main event against a pretty good fair matchup and give him another crack at a win.
Yeah, I'm with both of you guys on that one. I think a guy like Uriah Faber, he deserves that kind of respect. Unfortunately, in MMA, that's usually not the way it goes. And it's like, if Uriah Faber does want to stay in the sport and does want to continue, being an active fighter, he's got to face the fact that there's a very good chance that's not going to happen. I mean, people talk about Uriah Faber and BJ Penn, and that'd be a fun fight between two legends, right? It's kind of low risk for either guy. Anyone that loses is still losing to another legend. But then you think about, well, those guys are friends, and we've asked Uriah on the show before whether he'd take that fight, and he didn't really say no, but he kind of was like, BJ and I are friends, I'm not really interested in that. And then you look at bantamweight and even featherweight, there's not too many of those guys that are sort of slowing down and at Uriah's level where they're about to retire. There's guys kind of like that in featherweight, but they're still vying for that title. And yeah, the other thing I was just going to say is quickly, one thing I didn't like about this fight that I want to mention before we move on, just that eye poke I found a little bit ridiculous. Elias, I want to get your thoughts. Uriah sort of poured out and kind of got Jimmy in the eye, and I was pretty amazed that Jimmy was able to finish the fight essentially being blind. What did you think about that, Elias?
Yeah, I was impressed. I would have to review the rules, but I feel like at that point in the fight, if he said he couldn't continue, that they would have gone on the scorecards. I'd have to double check that. And so, credit to him for wanting to continue to fight. Yeah, that was an eye poke. I don't know if it was intentional, not intentional, but man, I wouldn't want to fight someone as good as Uriah Faber. I wouldn't want to fight someone bad with one eye. That's gnarly, man. I'm always shocked that these guys and girls don't usually take much time after a foul.
Yes.
It always impresses me, and I guess that's just who they are. They're just that tough. They just want to fight that badly.
There's a bunch of pirates with eye patches at home going, hey, we fight people all the time. We've got one eye. But sorry to all the pirate listeners out there. We don't mean to discriminate. Let's talk about the third fight on the main card. And before we actually talk about the fight, I want to talk to you guys about the build-up to this fight. I'm, of course, talking about the CM Punk debut in the UFC against Mickey Gall. A really interesting lead-up to the event. Obviously, CM Punk getting injured a couple of times, had to have surgery on his back. It was doubtful whether or not he was going to make it. Then they released the documentary series on it, which featured mine and Casper's silky smooth voice, and then the very first episode asking Don Fry what he thought about CM Punk coming to the UFC, which I don't think will make CM Punk want to be friends with us, but he should be friends with us because we're great friends if the relationship gets built to the right level. I want to get your thoughts, Elias, on the way the UFC handled him coming to the company. Were you happy with these documentaries? Were you happy with the way they were putting everything together, the embeddeds? How did that all come off to you going into the fight?
I mean, I guess yes and no. Like, I think the whole situation was ludicrous. So in one sense, I could say, no, I'm not happy with any of this in any way, shape, or form. It's demeaning to the UFC. It's ultimately, and something I want to talk more about too, is ultimately it was really unfair to CM Punk, the particular matchup that they gave him if they're going to do this silly circus show. But on the other hand, no, I mean, the storytelling was effective, I guess, on the shows. You can't have a big star like that and not do a television series to build up. So that's nice. And they, you get, it's always nice to get behind the scenes, such as it is, get inside the home of a star. So that's good. Once we're past the point where we've made this horrible decision to have someone with no sports experience fighting at the professional level, then yeah, let's definitely give access and do stuff like that. And he, he gave lots of interviews. He was, that's good. I'm fine with that. I'm not fine with the matchmaking. Let's leave behind the even my argument that he shouldn't have been fighting in the UFC, which I don't think is a controversial argument, but just, okay, he's there, we're doing it. I thought it was a bad matchup. It's something I actually talked with UFC officials about in the summer, and which kind of informed a column that I wrote later. But I feel like a lot of people ultimately were not just like putting on a show or a sham of a show for fans, but I think a lot of people have been lying to Phil Brooks, CM Punk, for the last 2 years, and that became increasingly clear to me that he was deluded going into this, and that's not good. I think he was deluded by his team. They were telling him and telling others, he's fought like 10, 15 times in the gym. What are you talking about? Those aren't fights. When you spar hard in the gym, those aren't fights, and he wasn't sparring hard. from the footage we've seen, which is considerable. He was doing timing sparring or something less than timing sparring, which is an important distinction. They were telling him that he was tough. I'm sure he's a tough human being with character, but he was not being put through the grinder in a way that would reveal that toughness or develop the toughness such that actual UFC fighters have. They were telling him that he was going to win. I don't know exactly what the motivation for all of that was, but when you had Phil Brooks, in the days leading up saying, "Oh, Mickey Gall, has just fought tomato cans. He's not a real pro. Oh, I'm gonna put a triangle on him. He's gonna wake up looking at the lights." When you have him saying that stuff and he wasn't really talking trash before, and you have him talking about how he's good under lights, and you have him coming out to pro wrestling theme songs, and he's talking about how where he's gonna fight his second and third fights. I mean, I think the guy was really deluded. I think he's a guy that doesn't have any martial arts experience before he walked into the roof of sport, and he goes in with a bunch of amazing coaches and fighters, and he's gonna believe what they tell him because he has no experience. Having Henry Gracie 2,000 miles away from you is not having a coach. He had no experience, and I think you have billionaires telling you should do it. You have coaches telling you can do it. You have them saying this is a good matchup, that this is a fair matchup, even though you have two jiu-jitsu-based fighters. One of them has been training for 2 years, is a white belt. The other has been training for 9 to 10 years, and is a brown belt under David Adib, one of the most respected jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world. And he's thinking he's going to throw submissions on. That was just really sad to me to see that, a guy going on 40 years old fought, with a history of concussions against a much younger man who was a lot more experienced, and he really thought he was going to do something out there. And that was too bad.
Mm-hmm. I want to speak about that a bit more, Elias, but first I want to find out why you thought Gall was a bad opponent, because to me, like you just mentioned, the fact that he was a brown belt going in there was something that I think wasn't fair at all, because when they were looking at who CM Punk should fight, I was thinking about this. I was contemplating this quite often. When they were thinking about who CM Punk should fight, they were looking at the record of MMA, but they weren't really looking at the skill set that Mickey Gall had going into the octagon. I feel like there should have been a cutoff point in terms of skill sets, and I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling is a really, really important skill set for a beginner when you go into your first fight. And having a guy who's a brown belt, who's a very, very good grappler, I feel like even though he's got a 2-0 record, you're still going up against a guy who's got so much experience and skill in one area that it's not really a fair matchup. I really felt like there should have been all right, the cutoff point here is a guy with a 0-0-0-1 record, but a guy who's at a blue belt level at a maximum, maybe a purple belt, but I even think a purple belt would be too much. Was that the reason why I thought it was a bad matchup, Mickey Gall? And who would you have put CM Punk up against if it was you who was choosing this exhibition fight?
Yeah, I think that is one huge reason why I think it's bad. Listen, it's one thing if the white belt in question is like Randy Couture or something like that. White belts beat black belts all the time when they're great kickboxers or wrestlers or something like that. When you have two jiu-jitsu-based guys and one of them is trained for five times as many years as the other as a brown belt compared to their white, that's ludicrous. I would challenge anyone, anybody here, anyone of your listeners, any of our listeners on Extra Rounds podcast, find me a matchup between jiu-jitsu-based fighters where one was a white belt, one was a brown belt or higher, and the white belt won. It doesn't happen, and it wasn't going to happen here. So that's a big reason. The other reason is age. I mean, you got not only you have an inexperienced guy, but he's got a really old body, and he's had a lot of serious back injuries and serious brain trauma injuries. Like that was another reason I didn't like it. And you're right. They should have been looking, if they were wanted to make a fair matchup, the UFC, the Ohio Commission, if they wanted to make a good, fair matchup, they would have looked at things like skill set. They would have said, hey, we're going to take a look, as state commissions are supposed to do, and they make exceptions. A lot of times they'll pull someone and say, hey, let me see you work with so-and-so. Dana White has done this reportedly with people. Like, let me see how you look with this guy, or let me see how you look with me in the ring, and we'll make some estimation. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that the UFC had any interest in making a fair matchup, that Ohio had any interest in doing their job, and instead they were just content with just letting the UFC self-regulate. I don't think they gave a shit about CM Punk. I think they got what they wanted out of him, and they'll get what they want out of him again, which is one more fight at least, would say, hey, has he gotten any better? And they could pull this whole ruse again. How much has he improved in 6 months, in a year? the answer will be the same unless they want to go with someone else who I would have matched him with if I was wanting to care about his well-being in any shape or form, to give him a chance at a fair fight. And matchmaking is supposed to be fair. That's actually a real serious issue. Like, it should be at least be on paper something that could be arguably fair. But when no one cares about it, from the promoter to the commission, you end up with matches like this. Now, it's very hard to fairly match someone up who has no martial arts experience and no sporting experience in a fight. It just is. Like, you wouldn't even give this guy an amateur fight. You'd say, hey, go do a jiu-jitsu tournament. Hey, go do a kickboxing. So it's extremely hard to get him a fair fight, hence why it's ridiculous to give him this chance. But if you're going to do it, there are thousands of white belt amateurs who have, 0-1, 0-2, 1-4, as amateurs, or whatever the case may be, who at least, some of them are 40s, some are in their 50s, some are in their 20s. If they really cared, they could have done it. But it's my understanding that the usual UFC matchmaking apparatus was not really, you implemented for this matchup. That some of the instrumental people in matchmaking had no interest in this matchup, in this ridiculous situation. And so it was Dana White just picked someone from a reality show and had him come in there and brutalize CM Punk.
Yeah, I mean, the UFC aren't stupid. They've been doing this for a number of years. This is what they do every single day. And looking at Mickey Gall, it's pretty clear that he's more experienced than CM Punk. Do you think that part of it was the UFC looking at it and thinking, because a lot of MMA fans kind of thought that, hey, CM Punk has to lose, for the, I guess, sanctity of this sport, to keep this sport somewhat pure, even though it's going, ever, constantly and more so in a less than pure direction. CM Punk has to lose. Otherwise, we all as MMA fans look like idiots if a guy with no experience can come in and beat, another fighter. Do you think part of it was the UFC kind of looking to, in some ways, make an example of CM Punk, even though he was an investment?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, right? Like, I don't actually have information to lead me to believe that's specifically the case. It wouldn't surprise me. Like, I think it's better for, real fighters to beat people who haven't trained martial arts for very long. That helps the UFC. Plus, I think they can sell it regardless of whether or not CM Punk, were to win. So yeah, I think that's entirely possible. I think it'd be tough if I think it'd be tough to find someone who would have lost to him. But that aside, I think they probably wouldn't want to have gotten someone who would have, I guess, who had stood a good chance to lose to him. I guess now they got another young guy that they could try to promote, a guy who isn't shy on the mic and who has a couple highlights now in Mickey Gall.
Yeah, it's interesting because do you guys remember when Brock Lesnar wanted to come to the UFC and he had the college wrestling background? So a lot of ways you look at his skill set, he's not a CM Punk. He's actually, a guy that could do quite well if he picks up the striking skills. And he had to sort of stalk Dana White, go to an event, sort of jump over a barricade to convince him to sign him to the UFC. Elias, do you think this is sort of an indication of how the sport sort of progressed into more of an, I guess, an entertainment? There's a lot of super fights, a lot of guys. There's always an argument about guys getting title shots. And now a guy with pretty much no experience gets signed to the UFC pretty quickly, whereas you'd imagine back in the day, I mean, Brock Lesnar had to go through quite a bit just to get a shot with the UFC.
Even James Toney. Toney had to go through a lot more. He had to do stalking of his own.
Those are really great historical points to bring out, guys. That's good context to remember. I wouldn't call it progress, but I think it's degenerated. I think the UFC does things a lot differently than they used to, from things like you just mentioned to deciding hard, symbolic, used hard, fast rules that used to be there, like who gets to come out second. And tonight we had the person who had no UFC experience come out after a person who had a UFC win. What's a main event? Who's getting title shots? Yeah, it's just they've veered away. I think they no longer have the concern they once did, which is we have to prove this is legitimate, and so we have to really at least have the appearance of legitimacy. I don't think they care as much. I think there's a lot of money to be made, and I think they'll go for short money and creating big stars now. Over fairness or things that make a lot more sense. And yeah, they've definitely changed a lot. If Brock Lesnar, one of the best American wrestlers in a certain period of time, who is also had some real star potential there, or star reality, had to jump through more hoops reportedly. It says a whole lot that they basically, the way Phil Brooks tells it, is that he was recruited by the UFC. Like, that's how far they've turned, right? Brock Lesnar had to jump over a barrier, and Lorenzo Fertitta was out, basically recruiting Phil Brooks. So maybe people like it, maybe they don't like it. I've definitely got my opinion on it, but it's a huge change and a departure from where they used to be, that's for certain.
I'm going back a little bit here, but when we started talking about this subject, you mentioned that you spoke to a few UFC officials about this matchup and how it was sort of alarming to you. I'm just curious, who did you speak to? What kind of conversations did you guys have?
Well, it was all on background. It was off the record, so I'm not
can't
gonna
really say it.
Well, what was the conversation like? If you don't give, we don't need the name. What was the conversation like?
No, but it was the types of people I'm talking about are at the executive level, and had good, and I had good reason to believe they had a real good understanding of UFC matchmaking. So that in high level, and the conversations, just the types of conversations I've had with fighters, with coaches, with UFC people, all sorts of people in the sport, have been like, wow, I'm kind of surprised that this was the matchup. Like, what exactly, I wonder, was the UFC going for here in giving Phil Brooks such an unfair matchup? Like, when they initially signed him, I thought, oh, they maybe want him to look kind of good and they could build a star. Then they give him this guy, and I look at the way Mickey Gall moves on the ground, and I think, man, this is just, look at his experiences. This is not a fair matchup. And so the conversations, these types of conversations throughout the past, this past 6 months or whatever, have been like, yeah, I'm kind of, or whenever the fight was announced, like, I'm kind of surprised, including with UFC officials. I'm kind of surprised. What was the reasoning? And that's when I got a little bit better understanding of that. Yeah, you know what? This is just kind of Dana White doing it. And some of the people that may ordinarily be involved with matchmaking didn't want any part of this, is the impression that I got. And so it was kind of left. And I'm sure that happens a lot. Like, I'm sure for big matches, like, sometimes it was used to be Lorenzo Fertitta, and Dana White sitting down, and for a lot of other matches, it would be Joe Silva and Sean Shelby and who knows who others. So I'm sure, responsibilities change a bit depending on the matchup. But I did get the impression that there were at least some integral people that were like, yeah, this is kind of silly. I don't really want to get involved in this. So that was like an observation after the alarming thing, which is just the matchup being made. That was the alarming thing for me, and I was kind of curious how that matchup got made. And the picture that I've gotten is that Dana White made the fight happen. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Dana White's going to come out and say he did all this due diligence. Maybe it's going to come out later and he said, I went to visit, Phil Brooks in Milwaukee a couple times, 6 months apart, a year apart. I saw his progress, his development. I felt good about it. Maybe he's going to come out and say all that. Maybe he's going to reveal all that. I don't think it happens. I don't think they cared at all how good he was, how he moved. If they had cared about that, any type of footage that was released would have set off real red flags. The guy can't, he's as good as someone would be if they started, aerobic kickboxing class, a year and a half ago, and they never done anything close to 40s. You're not going to be that coordinator, that good. I don't think they cared. So anyway, yeah, I had a number of conversations with people, over this past year about CM Punk in general, then this matchup, and the feeling, the sense that I got from some folks, including people at a high level in the UFC, was that this was basically something that Dana White put together himself from the reality show. And I'm not aware, maybe others are aware of due diligence on Dana White's part then to follow up and check on the progress and development of Phil Brooks.
Well, I mean,
well, there you go on, Cass.
I was just going to say that the whole thing is essentially the UFC playing defense. I mean, the reason why he even got brought into the UFC is because there was that period where I guess people were looking at who could potentially be, the next star, and then you had Dave Batista from the WWE and of course Guardians of the Galaxy. He made his MMA debut in a small regional show, and people were like, well, hey, what about CM Punk? And that kind of got the ball rolling. Scott Coker and Ray Seffer were being asked these questions, and the UFC kind of went, well, hang on, he's a guy who would be a big draw. We can't have him go there. I guess we'll sign him. And it's kind of a bit well, it is very disappointing because obviously the UFC they altered the entire format of what this the UFC is. You don't get guys getting these gimme matches. You don't get guys like CM Punk being brought in and then bring in another guy who was just as inexperienced, or in this case was far more experienced, just to sort of facilitate that fight. So it's crazy, where we sort of go from here as far as CM Punk's next fight, if there even is one.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what's happening with CM Punk next. But before we do that, I mean, it was brief. It was sort of ugly. It sort of turned out the way that a lot of people expected it, but Mickey Gall took him down and took care of business. CM Punk, by the way, when he ran out, I think he was so amped up, so angry that takedown was just academic at that point. Simple level change, and he was down on the ground. It was pretty. A lot of people predicted that this was going to happen. I just want to, before we talk about what's next for Punk, are there any takeaways from you guys from what you saw in the fight? Anything that you saw? For example, I was impressed that CM Punk was able to survive for 2 minutes and 14 seconds on the ground with Gall. He was in a couple of tough positions. I mean, look, he got flattened out and what happened, but I actually thought it would have happened a lot quicker. For a guy with, very, very low experience, I thought, hey, that's good. I was also impressed by the fact that he had the balls to go out there and do what he did. But are there any takeaways, Elias? Are there any takeaways from the performance and what happened in the octagon?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely tough. Like, everyone who fights is got some toughness and stuff. I think when you put it relative to other UFC fighters, it's not anything that stands out in my view. But yeah, I think I think Mickey Gall went for they were really subtle. Some of the movements were subtle, but he went for a lot of submission setups. I think he's probably just a good submission guy, and it's his go-to, and that took some time away from it. I think if he would have decided just to bomb the way, he might have been able to finish earlier, especially the first time he had the hips flattened out. But yeah, I mean, Mickey Gall, I mean, like, it doesn't really show me much more from Mickey Gall. I mean, it's kind of what I had seen before. Like, hey, this guy is big, he's strong, he moves well on the ground. In terms of Phil Brooks, yeah, I think it's just, he didn't get anything off because he just had no sense of where he was, and he didn't really have any sense of what to do other than to, be tough and take take a beating for a while and bite down in the mouth guard. And I had very little doubt that a former professional wrestler who these people let other guys and girls hurt them. Like, they're tough human beings. So I had no doubt that CM Punk could focus his mind to come in and take a beating, because he's actually had to do that a lot as a performer. I think hopefully he realizes now that gritting your teeth and biting down to take a beating isn't the same as being able to win a competition.
Yeah, it was. I think that's a great point that you bring up. CM Punk in there goes. I was actually a little bit disappointed. I sort of wanted to see what he had on his feet. I was hoping him and Mickey Gall would have a couple of exchanges on the feet. But I suppose when a guy sort of runs at you and just sort of gives you the takedown, you'd be sort of foolish not to take it. So you can't blame Mickey Gall for winning the fight in the quickest and easiest way possible. Casper mentioned it before, so I'm going to go to you again, Casper. CM Punk, what's next for him if he fights in the UFC? A lot of people are talking about the fact that he should go down to an amateur level or stay professional, but go down to a company that's not as big as the UFC, get a few fights under his belt if he really wants to do this properly, get some more experience, and then maybe return to the UFC down the track. But then that wouldn't make much sense to the UFC. What if he leaves the UFC, loses a few more fights, and then miss out on the opportunity to make more money off his name? He's already under contract with him. What do you think is next for CM Punk? Elias said there's a storyline there where you could be like, hey, how much has he improved over the last 6 months? Do you think there's a possibility we'll see him fight in the UFC again? And do you want to see him in the fight in the UFC again?
I mean, after a performance like that, I don't know if people will really buy it, the whole CM Punk being improved. To be honest with you, I think the right thing to do is cut CM Punk from the UFC. Now, I like the guy. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, for what he's done. And I think a lot of ways he's a victim of the circumstances. He got dragged in here because, like I said, the UFC didn't want Bellator to get him. So it's not his fault that he's in this position. But I think the right thing to do for the sport and for the UFC is to cut CM Punk. I don't want to see another fight like that. The only thing is, right, and I think I think Punk would do it. I think Punk would go down to, say, like, regional shows. It doesn't have to be a Bellator or a World Series of Fighting. I don't think Punk needs a big stage. I think he wants to do it because this is something that he's committed to. So I don't think he has an issue with not being on a big stage. I think if this was, Kansas Fighting Championship or whatever, I think CM Punk would do it. Money is not an issue for him. I think that the only thing I'm worried about is if he does go there, and Elias, you spoke about, Dana White, did he or did he not do his sort of due diligence? There's going to be a lot of sharks out there. There's going to be a lot of promoters out there who are going to want to get CM Punk, on their show. And in regional shows, there's obviously a lot less care taken of certain things. There's a lot far, far worse officiating, far, far worse reffing. My worry is that CM Punk goes to one of these shows and maybe fights a guy who's not as nice as Mickey Gall, maybe gets a guy who's out there to, really seriously hurt him, and that could potentially be the future. And, we're reading it in a year or 6 months or a year and a half or whatever, CM Punk, tragically injured in his fight. I think maybe amateur fights are probably the way to go for CM Punk. But either way, I definitely don't think, well, it's pretty clear he doesn't belong in the UFC, and I don't think that UFC should, continue this farce. He needs to be cut.
It's interesting, Elias, because here in Dana White's shoes, you let a guy go who's going to make a lot of money for someone else. And Neil Casper mentioned it perfectly. A lot of sharks out there, a lot of promoters are looking at CM Punk and going, hey, I can build a whole promotion off this guy. I can sign this guy. I can do internet pay-per-views. I can build a whole card underneath him. I could maybe even find him a few opponents that he can beat and pretty much build my organization off it. If I'm Scott Coker, I'm thinking, hey, this is exactly the kind of guy I can get in there and find him maybe a few matchups myself. If you're in Dana White's shoes, do you let him go to fight in another promotion, or do you keep him in the company from making sure he doesn't make money for someone else?
Yeah, I think if you're Dana White, you probably hold on to him at this point, right? You made your bed. I don't think Dana White thought Phil Brooks would do well. I don't think he cared. So I think if they are not embarrassed from even just making the matchup, they're not going to be embarrassed to cutting him now. I think that's the right thing to do, of course. As has been said, it should happen. And I hate saying that. It's just what do you, if the guy is outclassed by someone who had two professional fights, what are you going to do now to keep him in there? So of course he shouldn't be in the UFC, but I'd be surprised if they cut him. If anything, maybe they have him, hey, Punk, take some time off, rest, and they can have him hang around for a long time. People are going to love to interview him, ask questions, have him sign autographs. Still, right? That's not going to change. The people that love him are going to love him even more because he went in there and was humble after losing and was upbeat. So I imagine they'll try to keep him around if he doesn't want to fight, or if they don't want him to fight. I would hope that they would try to keep him on as some type of ambassador role and keep him paid, keep him as someone who can get attention for the UFC, and keep him away from Bellator. I mean, geez, if the UFC will do this, Bellator would match him up with a porcupine. I don't even want to know what they would do with him.
CM Punk can die to 5,000.
Yeah, geez, I know, right? In a hospital bed, it'd be horrible.
Ryzen would set him up with Fedor. It would be a great fight. Let's quickly just set the record straight, though, Liz, before we move on. I know you calling out CM Punk before, saying that you believe you were the right fight for him before. I personally think you're a bit of a beast, and maybe you have too much experience with CM Punk as well. But is the offer still out there? If there's a second fight, would you be willing to fight CM Punk?
Jeez, I mean, I'm gonna sound like an asshole because the man just went out there after a camp and fought, and I haven't been in a camp and I haven't fought, and I haven't gotten beat up tonight. So absolutely, it's a dickish thing for me to say at this point in time. But down the road, nothing really changes for me. Do they want to offer me, a fight that I don't deserve, that I get paid well to do against a matchup that I'd be fine with? Yeah, of course I take that fight. I'll take it tomorrow. I'll take it a year from now. I'll take it 15 years from now. I have no problem with that, other than the fact that he's a Chicagoan. He's a nice guy. He's a hardworking guy, and I have no animus towards him. But no, just like Phil Brooks couldn't turn down a shot that he had no business taking and didn't deserve. I don't think I'd turn down a shot that I don't deserve either. I would take that fight in a heartbeat.
Well, there you guys go. If you want to see that fight, by the way, jump on Twitter, tweet Dana White. Elias Cepeda next man to fight CM Punk. And if you do come out, Elias, forget about the coaches. Me and Casper are coming out with you, and we'll dress up any way you want us to. You have the choice as long as you get to come out. I'll hold your bucket for you, man. You don't need any advice in between rounds. We won't get that far. All right, now let's jump.
Violating Reebok uniform policy, and we have some interesting costumes. I'm down with that.
Okay, excellent. Now, let's talk about the co-main event of the evening. And a lot of people felt like CM Punk was supposed to be the strange fight of the night, but this fight was a lot more pro wrestling in a lot of ways. There was sort of a storyline. Things are happening. It was like the days of our lives. There's a surprise at every corner from the very get-go. Fabricio Werdum versus Travis Browne. And these guys fought before, and Werdum beat him before. I was picking Werdum to beat Travis Browne. Again, he wanted to quickly get back in after that loss to Cain Velasquez. Short notice. You got to give it for Browne for coming back around in such short notice. But the fight itself, guys, I mean, there is so much to talk about. So before we break down the craziness at the end, let's talk about the first controversy of the night. I'm not talking about the fact that how did Fabricio Werdum defy gravity and do that crazy jumping kick. I'm talking about the fact that there was that crazy moment where he went to punch Travis Browne. He hurt Travis Browne's finger. It looked like it was broken. Then craziness ensued. Elias, take it from there. Tell us, what did you think about what happened from that point? What was your takeaway from that? And what did you think about the refereeing job?
Glad you guys are talking about this. I'm glad Joe Rogan took the time to talk about this and Fight Night. So something happened that has actually been happening a bit more. A fighter got hurt by a completely illegal move, and completely understandably, in their shock and whatever, they tried to call a timeout. Travis Browne basically turned his back, was, making it seem like he wanted and thought he was justified in having some time to recover. It's understandable. He was in pain. It looks like his finger is broken or dislocated. That's tough. Take it from there. There is no timeout. There is no timeout unless the referee stops it for some foul or to check, a cut. There might be one or two other instances, but there is no timeouts for being hurt by a legal move that a fighter gets to call. That's called a TKO. So time was not called because there is no time to give. Fabricio Werdum correctly continued to fight. No doubt Fabricio realized his opponent was not paying attention and he capitalized, and he's a ruthless competitor. He's also, he's more than ruthless, but he was within the rules there. There's no cheap shot there. Mm-hmm. There was he threw a punch. It was attempted to be parried by Travis Browne. The punch broke or hurt a finger of Travis Browne. Browne turned his back, injured, and Fabricio followed up with a strike. What happened after there was wrong. The referee stopping in, I guess he was just overwhelmed. This happens a lot as well in these situations. The referee stepped in and gave Travis Browne a timeout. If he's going to step in because Travis Browne is turning his back and being passive and can't continue to fight, then that's a TKO win for Fabricio Werdum. I don't say that because I'm a Fabricio Werdum fan. I actually don't like anything about the guy other than his amazing fighting skills. He's just imperious and he's arrogant. Like, I happen to like Travis Browne, from afar. So it's not that I wanted to see Fabricio Werdum win or any one guy win over the other, but that was a completely wrong violation of the rules by the ref, and it's happening more and more. Refs need to do something, or their commissions need to discuss what happens when they get flustered. They need to have a good grasp of the rules. You don't just create a timeout that doesn't exist in a sport. That's ridiculous. That you can't. It's happened to a lesser extent, like back when Matt Hughes was fighting George St-Pierre for the second time when he faked that he had been hit low, right? Here there was no even concept there was anything that, no appearance of anything that could have been illegal. And the ref gave Travis Browne time to recover from a legal blow. You take that to its logical conclusion. If I'm caught in an arm bar, can I say, hey, you know what, time out. I don't like that. It's hurting my arm. I can't continue right now. I need a 5-minute break and let's restart from a different position. Can't do that. So from there, the ref completely goofed it up. I don't know if that's what Edmund Tarvidian was upset about later that resulted in the Teep heard around the world, which I hope you guys talked about. That was amazing. But once again, I have my feelings about how Werdum was justified in the amazing thing that he did there. So I think it was a complete mess up from the referee. And Fabricio Werdum, likable or as unlikable as he may be, was just fighting under the rules at that point, in my view.
Now, Cass, before we jump over to the craziness that happened after the fight, Fabricio Werdum, I don't know about you guys, but to me, he didn't look that good in this fight. Sure, he had his moments where he looked effective, but he looked very slow to me, a little bit out of shape, and not really the Fabricio Werdum that fought Travis Browne the first time around. Was it just me, or did you get that impression as well in this fight?
After the leaping, flying sidekick, I pretty much didn't pay attention to anything else. That, for me, was game, set, match. He could have taken a dump in the middle of the octagon, and I would have been like, bravo, beautiful performance by Werdum. But no, I get what you're saying. And to be honest, though, that's kind of, in some ways, been the story of a lot of Verdum's fights. Like, he's a phenomenal fighter. He's not a great athlete. And he does sort of tend to gas towards the end of some fights. The first Browne performance was probably one of his best ones because it's a fight where he went the distance and he looked good still towards the very end. And I found myself thinking the same thing, that, yeah, you know, he's looking a little bit wooden, he's looking a little bit slow, looks a little bit gassed. I think it may have been the whole drama of that situation where he kind of thought he won the fight, and then there was, just the drama. These things happen sometimes. And I think, like, you know, with Tim Kennedy, with the whole Yoel Romero situation, we spoke to him about that. And after the whole Stoolgate incident, he said he kind of mentally checked out. And I don't know whether it was adrenaline on Fabricio Werdum's part that kind of slowed him down. But, you know, whether it was or wasn't, you know, we've seen this with Werdum times in the past. It was sort of, the first round was amazing, and then afterwards was sort of, you know, things slowed down. I think it's also the fact that Werdum was exerting himself. Like, I think towards the end of, the second round, he was throwing these crazy spinning kicks, he was going for rolling thunders, and I'm thinking, like, dude, you've got another round and you're already slowing down. Like, I don't know why you doing these moves and these maneuvers that have a very low percentage chance of landing, and yet you're already starting to slow down. You're sort of tiring yourself. So, and look, this is not the kind of fight that is going to get him the next title shot. He spoke afterwards to, I believe it was Megan Levy, and he said, look, he wants that rematch, he wants the Stipe rematch. This is not the fight that's going to give it to you. Unfortunately, in theory, it should have been a round 1 TKO, so maybe if things were different, we would be talking about Werdum, and hey, maybe he should be the next guy. But to me, this fight, while it's a win for Werdum, it's also a win for Cain Velasquez, who obviously destroyed Browne at UFC 200 and is obviously now clearly looking like he should be the next guy for the next title shot.
Yeah, I wasn't very impressed with what I saw, and I'm wondering if there was some kind of injury, something in camp, something at all that sort of influenced that. But if he does want another shot at that title, we'd have to see the Werdum that we saw in that first Travis Browne fight. A lot more speed. He was also leading with his chin a lot, with his hands sort of down when he was throwing those punches, which is a little bit concerning when you verse some of the guys up the top end. But Elias, I want to ask you something. I want to talk to you about this whole coach thing before we get to it with Casper. Now, my opinion on the whole situation with Edmund after the fight is, if you're someone's coach, I feel like it's your responsibility to act professionally in that octagon, because if you go out there and you start saying shit to people and your fighter does something stupid, like gets in a fight with a guy after the fight is finished, your fighter's the one who has to pay for it. Or if something crazy happens, a lot of the time it'll go down onto your fighter's head. You're not going to be paying for it. You're not a part of the company, so you're not going to get probably the damage that the fighter will get. We all remembered what happened with Koscheck and Paul Daly after the fight when Paul Daly tried to punch him. I think if you have a problem, you address it properly, but not in the middle of the octagon, not after the fight. I think it's disrespectful. What did you make of this whole Edmund situation where he was basically yelling things at Werdum after the fight? I think he called him a motherfucker and said some other stuff to him. What did you make of that? What did you make of the tape? What are your thoughts on what the responsibilities of a coach should be after the fight, even if you're disappointed the way that Edmund was?
Yeah, you know, that's a really good way of framing it. I mean, look, Fabricio Werdum did what he often does, and he was classless and trolled them. He made like he was crying a face, and he looked in the direction of Edmund. He was taunting Edmund as the decision was about to get read. Maybe Edmund had said something before. I don't know. There was taunting going on. If Fabricio was the one who had started it, well, then Edmund fell right into his trap, because, you know, if there's a space, right? There's a space. I'll say the word man because I'm a man, but this goes if you're any type of an adult, if you're a woman or whatever. There's a certain distance that a screaming man shouting insults and possibly threats can get, you know, to before I have to do something about it or run away, right? And Edmund decided he was going to scream and yell. And Edmund is, you know, in addition to coach, he's a former professional fighter, And so Fabricio Werdum just fought 15 minutes, and he's got, yes, he was taunting and being probably just the Fabricio Werdum troll, and then he's got another guy who's a fighter screaming at him and getting closer. Hey, that was a good defensive teep. That's what that teep is for. You keep that person away. He didn't throw a big haymaker. I'm personally completely fine with Fabricio doing a get away from me teep. No one's hurt. I bet Edmund probably doesn't have internal bleeding now. I think it's fine. Now, Edmund's just got to deal with, like, hey, can I hold it together for the sake of my fighter? You look at poor Travis Browne afterwards. He's just shaking his head. He's not, like, all worked up. He just laid his heart out there. He took damage. He gave damage. It stinks. Now he's got a circus going on around him. You've got Rafael Cordero wordlessly walking straight towards Edmund, and Rafael Cordero is not someone you want to mess with either. And then you've got Babalu Sobral storming into the cage from the audience.
Yeah,
he's a phenomenal madman. I like him. Like, this is definitely something that at the very, like, I'm not saying Edmund Tarverdyan is like some horrible human being. I could get how you get worked up, but he certainly fell into a little bit of a trap there, and it's unfortunate. And, you just got to be ready to go, man. It looked like they were ready to talk, but Verdum's team was ready to step in there and risk getting, like, banned for life and fight. So don't scream at people. Don't scream at another grown man unless you're ready to fight him. And let's not judge too harshly the person who I feel said, hey, get away from me, with a little teep when that person was screaming at him, So I saw a lot of taunting from Werdum, and that's what he does. He does a lot of taunting. He does a lot of bending of the rules when he can, not in this fight. But and then I think Edmund seemed like he fell into the trap a little bit. It's understandable as a human, but I hope that no one gets, like, fined. From what I saw on television, I wasn't there, so I didn't have a great view of everything. But I hope no one gets, like, fined if no one got hurt. These are a bunch of men with histories. Just went through a tough fight, or saw their man go through a tough fight. So if no one got not hurt, and if no one, shot the other or stabbed the other afterwards, then I hope everyone can just walk away from it without fines.
Yeah, I think it's lucky that it didn't turn out to another, Strikeforce Nashville situation with, like, Mayhem Miller and Jake Shields and the Diaz brothers, which obviously got them kicked off CBS. I think that would be disastrous on the same night that a guy with no previous MMA experience makes his debut and gets obliterated, and then you have a brawl in the middle of the octagon. Would have just been terrible. What happens to poor Overeem and Stipe? Do they even fight after something like that? But what's crazy to me is I think the whole thing was actually a massive misunderstanding. I don't think Werdum was trolling Travis Browne or Tarverdyan or any of them. What happened was the crowd was booing a lot in Cleveland, right? It was a hot crowd, and they didn't mince words or their cheers or their boos. They were booing the fight. I'm not sure exactly why. I don't know whether they found the last two rounds a little bit uneventful. I don't know whether it was Travis Browne, but Werdum was kind of looking at the crowd, kind of going like, give me something. They booed, and then he made the, like, oh, okay, you're all a bunch of, like, crybabies face, and then he even motioned to the crowd, like, whatever, screw you. And then he turns around and faces an Edmund, who, I don't know, maybe Edmund was, like, looking around, turned around, sees Werdum making the crying face, and thought, hey, he's talking about Travis Browne, who obviously called a timeout in that fight. So, I don't know, it may have just been a big misunderstanding. I haven't had the chance to sort of go back and listen to the fight and check it out on Fight Pass, where you have the multiple sort of corner audio, but people on Twitter were saying that through the audio or through, being there, you could hear Edmund yelling, shrieking, in fact, a lot of obscenities in Werdum's way, I guess, to Travis Browne. So I don't know whether it was something personal. I think it's a possibility that Edmund sort of felt disrespected by the way that Werdum fought. I'm not too sure. He was making a lot of loud noises there, but yeah, I guess we're just kind of lucky that this whole thing didn't escalate into, like what you said, having Babalu there and Rafael Cordero. It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, and in the post-fight presser where they did the scrum stuff, Werdum, just like you said earlier, said that teep kick was because he wanted to keep Edmund away. So in a lot of ways, he probably did him a favor, because if Edmund got any closer, who knows what he would have hit him with. So are we all in the same boat where we believe that he shouldn't be fined and shouldn't get suspended? Or Casper, do you think that there should be some kind of punishment for this?
I think everybody sort of acted unprofessional. I think I think Edmund should have bit his tongue and he should have just saved that for the back. I think Werdum probably should be a lot more careful. It's hard because you make a good point, Elias, about how you can't really let another man get that close to you. And I guess you got to remember, like Werdum just finished fighting. He's probably got a lot of adrenaline. You don't really address a fighter in that way or in that tone after they've just been through a fight. I do think that Verdum's actions, he could have done other things, and I think that's what could have escalated something a lot worse. I don't know, man. I'm not really either for a fine or against a fine. I kind of wouldn't mind seeing a minor one just to sort of cool everybody and, remind everybody that, hey, you have to act like a professional. And obviously putting your hands on another man, like you could see Travis Browne afterwards, he was looking at Werdum and he was squaring up with him as well. They'd just been in a fight and Travis Browne looked like he would reluctantly have fought Fabricio Werdum or continue to fight him if something else broke out. So, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised to see Werdum get a fine. He also did say to Megan Levy that he thought Edmund was going to throw a punch. That's what he thought. He thought that Edmund was actually trying to throw a punch at him. So maybe that's why he did it.
Yeah, nothing against the referee, but he didn't do a great job in that fight. He was a little bit small, and maybe he was afraid the referee wouldn't get in between him at the right time. I actually wouldn't mind seeing Edmund get some kind of warning or something like that. I think there should be some rules in place where if you're in someone's corner, you should be professional and not I suppose, yell things at the other fighter when you know they're emotional and having that adrenaline dump. And as a as a former fighter himself, he should know that after a fight, your emotions are high. So, I mean, I think there was a more tasteful way for him to do that after the fight. Maybe come up to him, have a chat with him, like at the right time, and not in a place where he could have endangered anything. But yeah, before we move on from this, Elias, any parting words on the whole situation? Do you think this is a learning experience for the UFC?
This particular situation with Werdum and Edmund and all that?
Yeah, because it feels like we saw Daly hit Koscheck after the fight, but ever since then, we don't really see too many people sort of going crazy after fights, almost getting it on between each other. It could be a huge PR nightmare, and who'd be a huge nightmare for the sport. It could make people have a different view of the sport, negative view of the sport. It can do a lot of damage. Do you think? Well, I mean, I think Casper mentioned that they're lucky that nothing worse happened. But do you think this is a learning curve for the UFC? Do you think they look at this and go, all right, well, how do we control this situation? Do we issue fines for people in the corner? Do we put in rules for corner people not to be able to yell at each other? Do we have to do something where the referee has to be more alert to keep everybody back from each other? I don't know. They have to sort of re-look at this whole situation. Yeah,
no, it's interesting. I mean, it's a thing where like the UFC and like commissions who think about it together, and if they do come out with any type of sanctions, I really hope that they study a lot of tape to just like really figure out what happened and when and stuff, so they could try to be as fair as they can and proportional as they can. It's interesting, man. Like if you look at like boxing rings after big like major title fights, before and after, they're just so filled with dozens and dozens of random people. I don't. It's just amazing to me. So I feel like state commissions, when it comes to UFC fights and the UFC themselves, do a much better job, for whatever it's worth. I know you weren't asking for a comparative analysis, but it just occurred to me, like they do a much better job than boxing at keeping random people that could end up in some like Floyd Mayweather Zab Judah brawl. Like so I think they do a better job. The UFC and the commissions that work with it for those events do a better job during UFC events than boxing. But yeah, why not revisit? Look at the tape really seriously and see, is there anything we can do? Should we ask for more commissioner help? Should we have different spacing before before decisions are announced? Should we be more careful about clearing out the ring again from corners before after they've tended their fighter and before decisions are announced? They could certainly look at things like that. I hope they do. They don't seem to be super thoughtful a lot of times with reviewing stuff, whether it's like crazy words and offensive things that fighters say or things that are done. But if they do, they could always look to see what could be done. I hope they do it seriously. I mean, I think I just might be a hooligan. I don't see a gigantic problem with it, so I'm not too worried. I think you guys are right that it could look really bad for the sport. At the same token, I've seen boxers at the highest levels bite each other and punch each other the day before and at weigh-ins, and like the boxing still exists. So I don't know. I think, again, it's probably a moral deficiency that leads me to not be as concerned about it as others.
Well, I mean, look, I actually don't think anything's going to happen. And the reason, and I don't think there's much you can do, because in the sense that, like, you know, you always see coaches and, like, really, who was in the cage? You had the fighters and you had their coaches. There's not really anyone else. I think most people just think that everybody has the common sense not to get into a fighter's face after a fight. And this is sort of an anomaly where someone decided, obviously Edmund decided, hey, I'm going to do that. I'm going to yell. And it's just not really something that happens often. It's like, if you're going to put rules in place, what are you really going to say? Like, you can't talk to the opposite fighters. Like, you can't really do that. Like, normally you get fighters and coaches interacting, and there's a lot of moments where I look at it and think, like, God, I love this part of the sport. I hope that people that are against MMA can look at this and look at everybody shaking hands and hugging and having these moments and all that kind of stuff. And what are they really going to say? You can't speak to someone beyond a certain decibel, otherwise you're going to get fined. So I don't think anything's going to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because it's when you're in someone's corner, I firmly believe you should be focused on that person and just do whatever you can around them to help them.
Yeah.
And not sort of worry about these kinds of situations. So maybe, I don't know, maybe some kind of suspension system for people in your corner. And if you get over 2 suspensions, you can't corner a fighter. But then, of course, that would be really bad for the fighter if they can't get the person they want in the corner. But anyway, guys, let's move on to the main event. I mean, we've spoken about so much. In a lot of ways, it was a bit of a crazy event, all the stuff that's happened that we've spoken about, but still the main event was to come. Stipe versus Overeem. It was an interesting situation at the open workout where you didn't really get that many people. I think there might have been 100 people, and there was that one heckler who kept heckling Overeem over and over. Eventually, Overeem came over to him and gave him a hug, which, I mean, the heckler got lucky. I believe there were some other options the Overeem could have done, but there we go. It's a nicer Overeem. He had a different hairstyle, and he was putting out his hand, shaking it. And that heckler actually made it, I think, to a few different events. So it was pretty funny. The press conference, I think he was there. And also at the weigh-in, I think he was there. And at the weigh-in, I think he was wearing like a suit almost. So I don't know. Maybe he's making this whole thing into a career. He follows Overeem around wherever he goes, cafes, restaurants, bars, wherever. He just heckles him over and over again.
Overeem's trying to sleep. Gimmick. He's heckling him.
Yeah, that's right. He sees a real business in this thing. So we'll have a chat to him and tell him there's not that much money to be made in MMA. But let's talk about the actual fight itself. I mean, I personally picked Stipe to win it, but I wasn't sure in my pick because I knew Overeem had looked good as of late. It's sort of a new, reinvigorated Overeem with a strategic game plan that sort of hides his weaknesses, and he's had some good wins lately. Before we sort of talk about what happened, want to get who you guys thought was going to win this fight. Elias, who did you think was going to come out on top in this one?
It was tough for me to pick. I was going with Miocic, even though I didn't really know how it was going to happen. I will say this, about 30 seconds into the fight, I was pretty sure that someone was going to get knocked out.
What about you, Cass? Who did you think was going to be winning this one?
Obviously, I think if we're talking fighter, I think Overeem is technically the better fighter or more experienced fighter, but I thought Stipe is the better athlete. And he's very well ran at his own right. I had a feeling that Stipe was going to win just purely because Overeem's chin, as Bas Rutten said, it's never been the greatest, and I kind of thought 25 minutes for Miocic to sort of pressure Overeem, make him wilt, and then find his chin. I kind of thought, yeah, that's going to happen at some point.
Well, it was a strange fight because we saw Overeem knock Stipe down, and then he goes for a guillotine. Now, I know he's been successful with the guillotine before. I actually thought he would have been more successful if he kept pummeling Stipe from that position. But in the post-fight interview, Overeem claimed that Stipe tapped. Before we talk about the awkwardness that ensued when Joe Rogan kept replaying it and showing the fact that he didn't tap, I mean, what did you guys think of that moment? Did you think that Overeem went for the right move by going for the guillotine? Did you think it might have been a bit of a mistake? Did you think that there was a point there where you thought he might have won it? Elias, I want to get your thoughts on that whole situation.
Yeah, impossible to know for sure, but I have to end up siding with. I was watching the fight with one of my coaches, Matt Johnson, our Muay Thai, TDC MMA Muay Thai coach, and he said he feels fairly certain that if Alistair Overeem had decided to stick the top position after he dropped Miocic with a straight punch, and continue to strike, that he would have been able to finish it. That sounds about right. That seems about right as I watch the replays. He's probably right. Alistair, I guess, felt confidence in that guillotine that I don't think he's hit since he was 203 pounder. But and he looked, he certainly caught the neck. He didn't have his legs in position, but he caught the necks. But yeah, I think in retrospect, and it's probably going to eat at him, and so it sucks to even have to point it out, but probably he would have won the fight if he decided to just strike from on top instead of go for the guillotine.
I'm sort of on the opposite end, guys. I actually thought that the fight was going to end because we have seen Alistair. He does have a good guillotine. I believe the last time he was successful was against James Thompson, and that was in, I think, Elite XC or Dream. I think Elite XC. And I kind of thought, oh, man, like, considering how badly Stipe is hurt, this might be it. And then you see Stipe going over and passing guard, and you think, I think he's out of there. But for that split second, I thought that might be, game set match for Overeem.
When I was watching Overeem's performance, I was impressed in certain parts. In other parts, I was really interested. Elias, Overeem moved around a lot. At some point, it almost looked like he was jogging around the ring. Now, I know he was trying to reset, get into a good position to strike. But to me, it seemed like a little bit overkill. Like, Stipe was pushing the action so much. Overeem was trying to reposition himself, reset, restart the striking. But to the casual fan, it kind of looked like he was jogging around the ring away from Stipe for a large part of the fight. Can you sort of explain the reasoning behind why he was doing that? And do you think it was effective in this particular fight?
Yeah, I think it was pretty effective. This is the reason I think he was doing it. He turns his back, or at least his side, to opponents a lot, and he does that to bait them, I think, and it works well. And it worked well against Stipe a few times. In terms of the running away, he absolutely was just running away at times to reset. And as long as he doesn't hop over that fence, I don't really have a problem with it. But yeah, I think there was a reset component to it when the running, and then there was a baiting component to it, and then a lot of the other footwork, which wasn't turning the back or the side or running away, was these angles he was doing. The turning his back and changing the stances really lended itself towards these angles he was giving Miocic, which were really good. Miocic happened to have great footwork as well, but man, Alistair gave himself a real chance to win this fight with his angles, his footwork, and then landing some really big, opportune punches. Alistair doesn't throw in a ton of combination, his strikes. He needs to misdirect and fool people and do subtle things with his footwork and his shoulder rolling and his head movement in order to land a big punch and create an opening for himself. Miocic, he survived scares from being dropped to the guillotine choke. Then he's got power for sure, but he's got amazing volume and accuracy, and he was able to do that. He didn't load up with anything. He followed and stayed with Overeem and some of Overeem's more tricky footwork sequences, and then he started landing with the last sequence before he got that scramble takedown. He just landed 5 or 6 punches that weren't big load up punches, but they were just around, under, and over the guard of Alistair with real nice precision. So yeah, I think they got away from the point a little bit, but Overeem was doing something that didn't look good, but was giving him some opportunities to get at Miocic. So I could understand why he was doing it.
Okay, well, I mean, now we have a guy that's defended his title once, which is pretty impressive for the heavyweight division when all you have to do is do it more than 3 times and you're the man. Casper, what do you think about what this does for Stipe and his legacy? Do you think this gives him more fans, more people believe in him, builds his star a little bit? And who do you think he should be fighting next? Because I personally think Cain Velasquez is the man to do it. Do you agree? Do you think Cain's the next logical choice for him to fight?
Yeah, I mean, as far as Stipe's stock, this is massive. This whole card, in a lot of ways, hinged on whether Stipe would win. Or not necessarily whether he won or not, but that's kind of what they were building to. It wasn't really the most stacked pay-per-view. CM Punk, Ohio isn't really much to do with him, even though I believe Chicago was really close by. The main feature here was Stipe, the champion, fighting in his hometown. And if Overeem won, it wouldn't have really gone the way the UFC wanted. Even though in theory you've got a good champion in Overeem, Stipe wins. He's doing really well. He's kind of the overachiever. I remember people watching that Struve fight, me myself included, and kind of was like, oh wow, I thought this guy was gonna be something. And then that was kind of taken away. And since then he's really reinvented himself. He's just gotten better and better and better in sort of small increments. And he's looking like he may very well be a dominant champion. The only thing is now, I agree with you. Cain Velasquez is the next logical opponent. There's really no one else. I think Junior Dos Santos needs at least one more win. Fabricio Werdum's out of the running. So is Alistair Overeem. Cain Velasquez is the next man. And that is going to be a crazy fight. We saw Stipe Miocic fight Junior Dos Santos, very similar to the way Cain Velasquez fought him. So this is going to be a crazy mix of styles. I don't know if Stipe can get past Cain Velasquez. I definitely liked the way he matched up against Overeem a lot more than I do against Cain Velasquez. The only other question is we don't know when that fight's going to take place. We don't know whether Cain Velasquez is going to be able to be healthy and avoid injuries. So I'm hoping that fight takes place sooner rather than later. If Stipe does beat Cain Velasquez, well, now he's defended the title twice, and he needs one more to go down in history as, I don't know if you'd say the most dominant champion, heavyweight champion, but at least he would hold the record for most consecutive defenses. If Cain Velasquez can win the title, I think the UFC would be pretty happy about that, because in theory, he was meant to be the poster boy after he beat Brock Lesnar.
And he mentioned after the fight, in the post-fight scrum, that fighting in Cleveland was a bit tougher for him than Brazil because of all the commotion that was happening. But who is he kidding? I think if he defends his title one more time, they'll try and make it in Cleveland. Apparently, it was a huge sellout. The atmosphere was amazing. And if he does beat Cain, I mean, I think you're onto something, Cass. If you can beat that 3-fight defense streak and you go Alistair Overeem and Cain Velasquez as two of the guys that you've beaten, that's pretty impressive on the resume. Now, Elias, before we finish this up and tie a bow on this thing, let's quickly talk about one of the biggest culprits of the event, the elevator. Now, I don't know if you saw this or not, Elias, but Uriah Faber, Fabricio Werdum, and a couple of other people were caught in an elevator that went down a level. Thankfully, no one was hurt. However, CB Dollaway wasn't that lucky. He was actually forced out of his bout on this card due to a back injury riding the faulty elevator. What are your thoughts on this elevator? Should we suspend the elevator, get rid of it? How would you deal with the elevator from here on out?
I lock Edmund Tarvidian in it for 15 minutes and see who comes out alive.
Well, there you guys go. I think that's it for us for this week, guys. Episode 99 next week. Submission Radio episode 100. It's been a crazy ride, and we've gotten to the 100th episode, so we can't wait to come back. And I guess it's a bit of a milestone for us, Casper, so it's going to be exciting. And guys, if you have some memories from any of the previous episodes and you want to sort of bring it to our attention, make sure to tweet us the memories throughout the week. If there's any good ones, we'll read them out on the show next week. There's been a lot of interviews. There's been a lot of highs. There's been a lot of awkward moments. There's been a lot of tap-out rounds. So it's going to be exciting to sort of come to this point next week and do episode 100.
And before we officially put a bow on it, just want to thank the guests for this week. Obviously, Demetrious Johnson, great guy to chat to, TJ Dillashaw, and of course the man still on the line with us, powering through this massive, massive breakdown, Elias Cepeda himself. Elias, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be seeing you guys next week for that episode of 100. Be safe.